Welcome to Novel Love Hearing. We bring you hundreds of novel audiobooks covering every genre and every kind of story you can imagine. Action? We've got it. Adventure? Absolutely. Horror? Of course. Whether it's the legendary Uchiha massacre or outrageous tales like stealing Naruto's and Sasuke's women, you'll find it here. From epic series like One Piece, Bleach, Fairy Tail, and Hunter x Hunter, to countless other adventures, our library has it all. Love novels but don't have time to read? No worries, just plug in your earbuds, sit back, and let the story take over. Good listening, and happy hearing, but all kinds of weird hobbies. Like Iduma Urulisa. Fortunately, she is a woman, otherwise the Shinigami in the 8th Division would have already complained to Yamamoto Genryu's Ishigakuni about sexual harassment. In this regard, the only one who could rival or even surpass her is a future Shayuin Yoruichi. As for now, although there were already some signs, because she was still the young head of the Shayuin clan, and had not let herself go for 100 years, she was still far from Iduma Urulisa. A soul with more than spiritual power. When Iduma Urulisa heard this, she couldn't help but take a closer look at Matsumoto Ranjaku. She fully understood Ain's eye for talent. Students personally sent by such a person would definitely not be bad. Thinking of this, she suddenly became a little excited. The recruitment work might seem boring, but in fact, most lieutenants were happy to participate. For no other reason. Just because Yamamoto Genryu's Ishigakuni had said that as long as a genius Shinigami was recruited, it would count toward merit, which was extremely important for future promotion to Captain Imperial Guard. After all, not every Shinigami could be like Ain, graduate as soon as he wanted, become captain as soon as he said it, without needing qualifications or merit. Thinking of this, Iduma Urulisa immediately recruited a faculty member and asked him to perform a spiritual pressure test on Ikamaru-jin and Matsumoto Ranjaku immediately. Don't be nervous, just put your hand here. The faculty member also obviously recognized Ain's identity, and his attitude toward Matsumoto Ranjaku, whom he brought for assessment, was simply extremely kind. Okay. Matsumoto Ranjaku did not have stage fright either. She was a forthright and upright person who didn't stick to trivial matters. Especially after experiencing the Meno's grand attack, her mentality had completely changed. Thus when Matsumoto Ranjaku put her hand on the spiritual pressure testing crystal ball, various colors of light jumped out one after another, and finally settled on orange. Hiss. Orange. This is SS level. Seeing this scene, not only the faculty member responsible for testing Matsumoto Ranjaku, but also the nearby Shinigami were shocked. None of them expected that the spiritual pressure of someone randomly picked from Rakongai by Ain would be SS level. Although she is not as good as Lieutenant Aizen, she is still a genius rarely seen in a century. Iduma Urulisa's expression moved slightly, looking at Matsumoto Ranjaku in disbelief. Lord Ain, what is SS level? Matsumoto Ranjaku pulled Ain's sleeve and asked curiously. You can understand it as meaning that you not only have the potential to become a Shinigami, but you can also become a Captain Imperial Guard. At least in terms of spiritual pressure, you have no problem. Ain was not surprised at all. Matsumoto Ranjaku was originally Heaven's favored child, and just like several of Uaxshutsafel, she carried the fingertips of the Soul King inside her body. At this time, Aizen did not take away the Soul King's fingertips as in the original timeline, nor had Hogyoko absorbed a wave of spiritual pressure, severely damaging her soul. It was natural for her to have captain-level potential. Of course, in his eyes, this was only enough to qualify as his lieutenant. Captain Imperial Guard? Someone like you? Lord Ain. Matsumoto Ranjaku was so surprised that she opened her mouth wide and smiled. She had originally thought that being able to become a Shinigami was already a blessing from heaven, but she never thought that Ain actually said she had the potential to become a Captain Imperial Guard. What are you thinking about? You're only up to par in spiritual pressure. Also, having the potential to become a Captain Imperial Guard doesn't mean that you can be like Captain Ain. Iduma Urulisa heard this and couldn't help being amused by Matsumoto Ranjaku's whimsical thoughts. Let me tell you this, after all, this is a well-known fact in Syriite AI. In 13 Division of Imperial Guards, although there are 13 captains, excluding the head captain, there are actually two types of captains, one is Captain Ain, and the other is all the other captains. So, do you understand? Even if you are lucky enough to become a Captain Imperial Guard in the future, you cannot be like Captain Ain. Seeing that Matsumoto Ranjaku seemed to understand but also not understand, Iduma Urulisa also directly opened the skylight and spoke frankly. Anyway, she herself was a lieutenant and was on good terms with most of the Captain's Imperial Guard, so she was not afraid of offending anyone by speaking this way. Chapter 120, she would definitely be the captain of the 8th Division. It doesn't matter. Being a Captain Imperial Guard is already great. After Matsumoto Rinjaku learned from Yaduma Urulisa that there were two types of Captain's Imperial Guard, one was Ayan and the other was the rest, she was not disappointed, but instead looked shocked and happy. The shock was because of Ayan's strength. She was happy because she had the potential to become a Captain Imperial Guard. This meant she was qualified to stand by Ayan's side in the future. Sure enough, my idea is correct. If the Captain's Imperial Guard are compared to a 100-point test paper, it might look like all Captain's Imperial Guard scored 100 points, full marks, standing side by side. But in reality, this is not the case at all. The other captains get 100 points, that's their limit, but Captain Ayan only gets 100 points because the Captain's Imperial Guard test paper only has 100 points as a full score. In other words, the reason Captain Ayan is a Captain Imperial Guard is because there is no rank higher than Captain Imperial Guard in 13 Division of Imperial Guards. Ekamaru Jin, who also listened to Yaduma Urulisa's words, thought to himself. After witnessing the battle between Ayan and Kinpachi Zaraki, he vaguely guessed that there was not only a huge gap between Shinigami and Shinigami, but also a huge gap between Captain Imperial Guard and Captain Imperial Guard. You're not afraid that the head of the 8th Division will slap you with a Zanpakuto after hearing this? Although Ayan said this, he did not deny what Yaduma Urulisa said. It doesn't matter, he doesn't care about this. Besides, what I said is true, and the head of the 8th Division himself said that he can't beat you. Yaduma Urulisa sounded nonchalant. As she spoke, she couldn't help but look at Ekamaru Jin. An SS-level Matsumoto Rinjaku had already given her a lot of merit. If there was another SS level, no, even if it was just an S-level spiritual pressure student, if Shun Sekiraku had any accident, she would undoubtedly be the captain of the 8th Division. Go ahead. Ayan said to Ekamaru Jin. Ekamaru Jin stepped forward, looking polite and harmless. It made the teachers feel at first glance that he was a good child, the type with no aggression. TSK as Ekamaru Jin put his hand on the spiritual pressure ball. Lights of different colors shone one after another and soon stopped. Red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple. Finally settled on orange. The same as Matsumoto Rinjaku, who held the Soul King's fingertip. Call. Ekamaru Jin felt relieved when he saw this. This was just right. Neither surpassed Matsumoto Rinjaku nor fell behind. If it had been different, he would still have wanted to protect her quietly even after coming to Siriite AI? Yes. Although he had only known Matsumoto Rinjaku for a few days and was not yet the childhood friend he would become later, he already regarded Matsumoto Rinjaku as his only relative and friend. Orange. Another SS class. Although they are not like Captain Ayan and the others, they are still two-pronged geniuses. Yaduma Urulisa exclaimed in surprise. When she looked at Ayan, her eyes under her glasses were full of brilliance. Nothing else. Just because of Ayan's casual actions, it was equivalent to throwing two large pieces of Captain's Imperial Guard merits in her face. Especially once Matsumoto Rinjaku and Ekamaru Jin really became Captain's Imperial Guard in the future, then as long as Shun Sekiraku died or was transferred, she would definitely be the captain of the 8th Division. No one could shake it. Lieutenant Lisa, has Master Ayan also conducted such a test? When Matsumoto Rinjaku heard this, she immediately became interested. Yes. Captain Ayan is from Rakongai like you. Just half a year ago, he and Lieutenant Aizen came to the Shino Academy and took the same assessment here. When Yaduma Urulisa looked at Matsumoto Rinjaku, her tone was very close and friendly. Who would refuse to befriend a Shinigami who had the potential to become a Captain Imperial Guard? Especially when the other person was also a woman like herself. It was more convenient to talk. Aizen? Ekamaru Jin remembered the name. His innate intuition told him that the owner of this name was not simple. Even if not as good as Ayan in front of him, it was still an extremely terrifying existence. Lieutenant Lisa, may I know Master Ayan's results at that time? Was it red, S level? Seeing that Yaduma Urulisa was easy to talk to, Matsumoto Rinjaku no longer had any worries and boldly asked. If it's red, yes. But that's not Captain Ayan. It's Captain Ayan's younger brother, the current lieutenant of the 1st Division, Aizen Sosuke. Yaduma Urulisa glanced at Ayan, and after seeing that he had no intention of stopping her, she recounted the admission incident that happened at the gate of the Shino Academy half a year ago, enough to be embedded in the history of Soul Society. He is a Shinigami genius rarely seen in hundreds of years. He entered the Shino Academy with a red spiritual pressure grade, S level. It only took him less than 3 months to graduate from the Shino Academy. And after graduation, he became the lieutenant of the 1st Division. She first talked about Aizen's achievements at that time and his current status. No wonder you just said you are double geniuses. It turns out it's not Jin and me, but Captain Ayan and his brother. What about Captain Ayan? You just said that his score isn't red. Is there a higher score above S level? Matsumoto Rinjaku marveled inwardly. People with Sosk in their name are super geniuses. There is indeed no grade higher than Red Spiritual Pressure, S level, but that was before Captain Ayan. Since he came to the Shino Academy half a year ago, he broke the record of more than 2,000 years in one fell swoop and created a unique spiritual pressure level, forcing the Shino Academy to set up a new level for him that did not exist before. In other words, Captain Ayan, he made Soul Society history. When Yaduma or Lisa talked about the entrance examination half a year ago, her voice revealed a bit of regret. It seemed that she deeply regretted that she could not be there at the time to witness this scene that would be embedded in the history of Soul Society. Unique? Matsumoto Rengeku was shocked and a little confused. This thing is called a spiritual pressure ball. Even if an ordinary Captain Imperial Guard pours spiritual pressure into it, it won't be damaged. But Captain Ayan, who had never been exposed to Shinigami training before, exploded it in just one test. In other words, his spiritual pressure was already higher than the average Captain Imperial Guard at that time. Can you understand what I'm saying? Yaduma or Lisa reached out and picked up the spiritual pressure ball she had just given to Matsumoto Rengeku and Akamaru-jin for testing. She opened her mouth and shocked the two of them. They looked at the spiritual pressure ball in Yaduma or Lisa's hand, and then at Ayan beside them. Previously, Matsumoto Rengeku and Akamaru-jin had seen Ayan's godlike power in the 80th district when they saw him smash the Horn Menos Grand like a god, and then fight with Kenpachi Zaraki and easily defeat him. But now, after retracing the path Ayan took half a year ago, they felt even more intuitively the insurmountable gap between themselves and Ayan. Chapter 121. No, I'm just here to give you a chance to follow me, okay, Lieutenant Lisa? I'll leave the two of them to you. After seeing that the results of Ikamaru-jin and Matsumoto Rengeku came out and were almost as expected, Ayan had no intention of staying at the Shino Academy. No problem. Aren't you going to see your old classmates? After hearing the meaning in Ayan's words, Lisa couldn't help but ask. There will be plenty of opportunities in the future. Ayan shook his head and had no intention of going to find Shiyu and Yoruichi and the others. Captain Ayan. Can I join the 5th Division in the future? Just as he was about to leave, Matsumoto Rengeku mustered up the courage to stop him and boldly asked. Of course. As long as you graduate from the Shino Academy. Ayan paused, then turned to Matsumoto Rengeku, smiled back, and then disappeared. It seems like another follower who was conscripted into the uniform by Captain Ayan. Yaduma or Lisa was not surprised when she saw this scene. In 13 Division of Imperial Guards, Shinigami like Matsumoto Rengeku were no longer rare. If Siriite AI didn't restrict Shinigami from changing squads easily without the captain's Imperial Guard permission, she had no doubt that she would be able to fill up the 5th Division's office with application forms sent every day. Come on. Based on your 2 scores, there is a 100% chance that you'll be placed in the 1st class. Captain Ayan has just taken office not long ago, and the positions of lieutenant and 3rd seat are vacant. If you can graduate early, you may be able to catch up with one of the positions. After noticing Matsumoto Rengeku's admiration for Ayan, Yaduma or Lisa casually dropped a bombshell. Lieutenant Lisa, how long will it take to graduate early? As expected. When Matsumoto Rengeku heard this, her beautiful eyes blinked with excitement. Call me Sister Lisa. In terms of time, 1st class students generally have the potential to become Captain's Imperial Guard, so most of them apply for early graduation after 1 year of enrollment. As for the fastest, that's the record set by Captain Ayan, who graduated after just 1 month. In a few words, Yaduma or Lisa used some well-known facts in Siriite AI to get closer to Matsumoto Rengeku. I heard from the captain of our 8th division that this is already the result of Captain Ayan deliberately postponing his graduation. If it weren't for Hirako. In short, if Captain Ayan had wanted to, he could have graduated from the Shino Academy in 5 days. When she mentioned Hirako Shinji, her voice paused, then she ignored Hirako Shinji and continued. Akamaru-jin, who was following the 2 women, said nothing during the whole process, but he heard all the conversation between them. Through Yaduma or Lisa's words, he got to know Ayan more and more deeply, but what followed was a shocking feeling of looking up at a peak with no end in sight. Starting from the entrance examination, to graduating early, and even becoming a Captain Imperial Guard. Akamaru-jin discovered a striking similarity, that is, Ayan was creating the history of Soul Society all the time, and all records were created by him alone. It seems that the name Ayan Sosk was born to create Soul Society's history. On the other hand, after Ayan left the Shino Academy, he walked slowly toward the 2nd division, but no one could see him clearly along the way. Because every step he took was flash steps. It seemed that flash steps, one of the sword art, hand-to-hand combats, flash steps and Kido, had already been integrated into his life, just like eating and drinking. It was no longer a Shinigami skill, but an instinct. Other captains walked in a leisurely manner. When he walked, He was leisurely in the courtyard. Maggot's nest. In a cell located in the deepest part of the cell, Kurotsuchi Mayuri was lying on the cold floor as usual, looking at the ceiling expressionlessly, but unknown scientific inspirations were constantly bursting out in his mind. There was no research room. There were no research materials. It didn't matter. Then he simulated the experiment in his mind. This was also a way to pass the time and a way to entertain himself. "This is the first time we've met, you must be Kurotsuchi Mayuri." Suddenly, a voice sounded in Kurotsuchi Mayuri's ear, instantly waking him up from his scientific thoughts. He suddenly turned his head and looked around, only to find a figure standing outside the cage. "Oh? What an unexpected and rare guest. I didn't expect that the mighty Shinigami hero would come to this Maggot's nest and greet me, a criminal." After Kurotsuchi Mayuri saw Ain's face clearly, a strange smile appeared on his face. Apparently, although he was imprisoned in the Maggot's nest, he was not completely ignorant of everything in the outside world. Criminal? That's just the stupid cognition of a group of short-sighted and cowardly guys. That's right, after all, they're just mice. We can't ask them to have long-term vision and extraordinary courage. Ain shook his head and laughed. It seems the rumors are true. The Shinigami hero of 13 Division of Imperial Guards is not impressed by Central 46. It's really interesting. Sire-eyed AI can actually tolerate a Shinigami like you? Instead of imprisoning you here, or in Mukin. Kurotsuchi Mayuri sat up from the ground and looked at Ain with interest. The reason he was imprisoned in the Maggot's nest was not because of any criminal facts, but simply because Central 46 judged him as a potentially dangerous person. But what about Ain? It was incredible that Central 46 could allow him to be dubbed the Shinigami hero and captain of the 5th Division despite openly questioning them. Nothing else. My Zanpakuto is just stiffer than their necks. Ain spoke touching words nonchalantly. So are you here today to show off your power to me? Kurotsuchi Mayuri looked at Ain with a half-smile, but his mind was thinking about the other party's purpose. No, I'm just here to give you a chance to follow me. Ain's tone was neither sally nor bland. Although you are different from ordinary reckless people, you don't seem to have such a thing as science in your brain. I'm sorry. I don't think following you would be any better than staying here. Kurotsuchi Mayuri seemed polite when speaking, but in fact, there was a hint of contempt in his words. In his opinion, both Shinigami heroes and Captain's Imperial Guard were just a group of Shinigami monkeys with low intelligence. Science? Is it the kind of thing that can be wiped out with a flick of a finger? If that's what you're talking about, then I really don't have such a thing. When Ain heard this, he smiled instead of getting angry. Don't speak arrogantly. You'll only show your stupidity by saying such things. Just like those idiots who locked me up here. When Kurotsuchi Mayuri heard this, he became furious and stood up from the floor. Ain didn't speak, just glanced at him. Boom. The overwhelming spiritual pressure was like a torrent that burst a dam and instantly submerged Kurotsuchi Mayuri physically and mentally. Snap. With the sound of a heavy object falling to the ground, he was already kneeling on the ground, his whole mind blank. His pride and confidence in science disappeared under the boundless spiritual pressure. Almost exhausted. Even his thoughts were crushed to pieces by the monstrous spiritual pressure, and then turned into a mess. Not to mention standing up, he couldn't even think normally. Chapter 122, It's just that you don't seem to understand what I hold. Can your science help you? Can your science get you on your feet? Or is it that your science can help you shorten the gap between you and me? Tell me, Kurotsuchi Mayuri. Ain withdrew his spiritual pressure and looked down at Kurotsuchi Mayuri, who was kneeling on the ground. He was choosing subordinates, not actors for a farce. He was not Hura Harakisuke and would not let an opponent jump up and down in front of him, unable to distinguish priorities. Ain. After breathing heavily for a moment, Kurotsuchi Mayuri raised his head, revealing his angry face drenched in cold sweat. Just as he was about to say something, he found that Ain suddenly reached out to him and slowly raised a finger. Whoosh! In a flash of green light, the two of them disappeared from the Maggot's nest without alerting anyone or triggering any alarm. At the same time, Rakongai. On a deserted plateau, Ain and Kurotsuchi Mayuri suddenly appeared. This is the East 80th District. Kurotsuchi Mayuri looked around and immediately figured it out, a realization that made his hair stand on end. Abandoned chanting. In an instant, he had transferred them from the Maggot's nest, thousands of miles away, to the Rakongai East 80th District. Aside from his intelligence and science, what he was most proud of was Kido. It was precisely because of this that he understood what Ain's space transfer just now meant. The highest peak of Soul Society's Kido? He dared not say that. But compared to Ain, his Kido accomplishments were like a firefly's light next to the bright moon. You said I don't understand science. Yes, I don't understand. It's just that you don't seem to understand what I hold. Aen's voice was neither loud nor soft, but every word carried boundless spiritual pressure, striking Kurotsuchi Mayuri's heart. What is it? Kurotsuchi Mayuri forced himself to appear arrogant, trying not to let Aen see the terror deep in his eyes. You know nothing about power. Aen turned and stared directly into Kurotsuchi Mayuri's eyes. No. It should be said that you, Kurotsuchi Mayuri, know nothing about my power. Before Kurotsuchi Mayuri could get angry, he continued. Yeah? Then please let me see the power you say I know nothing about. Kurotsuchi Mayuri roared through gritted teeth. As you wish. Aen took a deep look at Kurotsuchi Mayuri, then suddenly spread his fingers, palm facing up. Spiritual pressure, many times stronger than in the maggot's nest, surged out like a hurricane, roaring and raging across the plateau. Boom. Kurotsuchi Mayuri, who was standing next to him, couldn't even stand still. He was directly blown dozens of meters away by the sweeping spiritual pressure hurricane and slammed into a protruding boulder. Then his entire body seemed to embed into it, pinned so hard he couldn't move. What's with this spiritual pressure? Forget Bankai. He hasn't even released his Zanpakuto yet. Kurotsuchi Mayuri ignored the pain in his back, his eyes wide open to the limit. Horror burst continuously from the depths of his pupils. Not yet releasing Zanpakuto, and yet his spiritual pressure had already surpassed every Captain Imperial Guard he had ever met. What if he used Bankai? Wouldn't spiritual pressure alone be enough to crush him to death? In the face of this spiritual pressure, did all wisdom and all science really have any meaning? At this moment, he couldn't help but ask himself. Crack. Just as Kurotsuchi Mayuri was in shock, Aen waved his fingers, and the plateau beneath his feet instantly cracked. Huge fissures extended in all directions, turning the land within hundreds of meters into a giant canyon abyss in an instant. Boom. Accompanied by a high-pitched dragon roar that shook the ground, billowing spiritual pressure burst out from the abyss, spewing like magma and forming a towering curtain of light. Immediately after. 1, 2, 3. A total of 5 golden spiritual pressure dragons, each as huge as a mountain, rose from the ground. They blasted the already fragmented plateau into pieces, dragging countless boulders and dust pillars into the sky, coiling atop the heavens and emitting spiritual pressure so intense it distorted the air. Hado number 99, 5 Dragon of Destruction. Aen's indifferent eyes casually looked at the distant mountains. With just a glance, the 5 spiritual pressure golden dragons coiling above seemed to receive an order. They all chose to obey immediately, twisting their enormous, atmosphere-distorting bodies, and swooped toward the towering mountains together. Then, the 5 spiritual pressure golden dragons opened their mouths and bit down on the mountains at the same time. Boom. Golden light flashed. The 5 dragons turned into towering spiritual pressure beams one after another. While rushing straight up into the sky, they spread outward in all directions. Only after completely submerging the mountains did they stop expanding. Immediately after, they frantically unleashed power that tore the sky and shattered the earth. Boom boom boom. Each second that passed, a burrowing spiritual pressure storm spread out, crashing into Kurotsuchi Mayuri, who was pinned and unable to move. Bang bang bang. In just a few seconds, the boulder behind Kurotsuchi Mayuri was torn to pieces, sending him flying hundreds of meters away. He tumbled across the ground like a ball. When he finally managed to stop and pulled his face up from the dirt, what greeted his eyes was a towering mushroom cloud. Looking down, he was horrified to find that the towering mountains just now had disappeared. Only a vast, bottomless basin remained beneath the mushroom cloud, curling and trembling. Science? Is it the kind of thing that can be wiped out with a flick of a finger? Kurotsuchi Mayuri stared blankly at the drastically changed landscape ahead. The words Aen had just spoken to him in the maggot's nest replayed in his mind. He wanted to refute, but the godlike Keto power in front of him made it impossible to squeeze out even a single word. Compared to Aen's power, the science he mastered was indeed something that could be wiped out with a flick of a finger. This was an undeniable fact. What was even more terrifying was that this was just Keto, and it was Keto cast without chanting. What about Kendo? Although he had been imprisoned in the maggot's nest, Kurotsuchi Mayuri had also heard that before Aen graduated from the Shino Academy, he had pinned Hiroko Shinji, then a Captain Imperial Guard, to the wall using only Kendo, unable to move. What about hand-to-hand combats? Although Aen rarely used it, he did not believe this man would neglect any of the 4 main Shinigami arts. Not to mention Zanpakuto. That was the first Zanpakuto, the most powerful light and dark dual-element weapon in the history of Soul Society. Yes. After the incident at the Kuachiki clan's hollow experiment, the captains of 13 Division of Imperial Guards, with Aen not deliberately hiding it, already knew that his Zanpakuto was not just the strongest in the dark element as they had once believed, but the strongest in both light and dark elements. With such Shinigami power in hand, if combat power was fully unleashed, no matter how Kurotsuchi Mayuri fantasized or predicted, he could not imagine how terrifying it would be. You should now understand my power. What about your science? When will you let me understand it? Ain turned and looked down at Kurotsuchi Mayuri, who was hundreds of meters away. The two looked at each other across the distance. Suddenly, Kurotsuchi Mayuri moved his neck and slowly lowered his once proud head. Chapter 123, But you understands that science has value because of my existence. You, Kido, are very happy that you pretended to be cool and didn't forget to bring him along, so he specially presents you with the latest Kido masterpiece, the combination of Hado Forbidden Technique, Amaterasu and Hado Forbidden Technique, Flame Control. As Kurotsuchi Mayuri lowered his proud head and admitted that all the knowledge he had mastered and all the science he believed in were merely things that could be wiped out with a flick of Ain's fingers, Kido, who was well versed in human nature, immediately presented a gift. When Ain recruited a scientist like Kurotsuchi Mayuri, he also harvested a set of Kido combinations along with him. Hado Forbidden Technique, Amaterasu. Hado Forbidden Technique, Flame Control. Without exception, they were all forbidden techniques. Ain was not surprised at all. All of his Kido were indeed high-quality masterpieces, but they were also so advanced that every Kido he created either violated Soul Society's taboos or was extremely dangerous. Only he could use them. For anyone else, let alone using them in battle, even attempting to practice them would lead to death before even fully learning them. How are you going to accommodate me? Captain Ain. If I remember correctly, you are the captain of the 5th Division, not the 12th Division. You aren't going to let me handle rescue work, are you? Kurotsuchi Mayuri seemed to adapt quickly to the change in mentality and identity. While he had been arrogantly spouting off in the maggot's nest just moments ago, he had already changed his address now, and his tone was so natural that it didn't feel forced at all. Although I am the captain of the 5th Division, if I want, I can make you the captain of the 12th Division. As soon as Ain spoke, Kurotsuchi Mayuri was shocked. As for now, although the 5th Division is a rescue squad, as a rescue squad, researching technological products to help other squads in rescue is perfectly reasonable. What do you think? Lieutenant Kurotsuchi Mayuri. He looked at Kurotsuchi Mayuri, the corners of his lips curling slightly. Yes. At this stage, the person most suitable to serve as his lieutenant was none other than Kurotsuchi Mayuri. As for Matsumoto Rengeku and Akamaru Jin, who carried parts of the Soul King, they still needed to be nurtured for a year and a half in the Shino Academy. Unlike Kurotsuchi Mayuri in front of him, who was like immediate cash, ready to be withdrawn. This doesn't seem like something a Shinigami hero would say? Captain Ain. Kurotsuchi Mayuri suppressed his inner shock and stared deeply at Ain. At this moment, he realized that this man in front of him was not what he appeared to be, nor was he what every Shinigami in Siri-ite AI thought he was. I think I've never said that I am a Shinigami hero. Ain thought for a moment before speaking calmly. What a dangerous man. Kurotsuchi Mayuri shook his head and sighed. Although he was not as sharp as Urahara Kisuke, from Ain's unabashed performance, he still understood the terrifying nature of the man before him. Only a dangerous man like me will understand your value and make use of you, instead of locking you in the maggot's nest forever. Isn't that right? My lieutenant. Ain spoke slowly, word by word. I want to take back what I said before. Captain Ain does not have science in his mind, but he understands that science has value because of my existence. Kurotsuchi Mayuri grinned, his face showing a long-suppressed madness. He had too many experiments he wanted to conduct, too many things he wanted to research, too many inventions he wanted to create. Under Ain's command. Not only could he get what he wanted, but he could also touch areas he never dared or could not touch before, all without restraint. Yes. Ain was not a Shinigami hero, but a dangerous man. This was what Kurotsuchi Mayuri said, but so what? Could it be that staying locked up in the maggot's nest made him a law-abiding, good citizen of Soul Society? He felt no resistance or disgust at all about working under Ain, only excitement and anticipation. That night, Aizen walked out of the 1st Division, his steps slow and leisurely. Every Shinigami he encountered along the way seemed invisible to him. It was like a lonely soul wandering through Siri-ite, drifting among various divisions, until he passed Central 46. There, he stopped and stepped in. The Shinigami hidden around for constant surveillance seemed to have collectively gone blind. No one saw him, allowing him to enter and leave Central 46 freely. When Aizen arrived at the Central Underground Chamber, someone was already sitting there, seemingly waiting for him. It's full and can no longer grow. Power has reached a bottleneck. Just like Minos Grand, who lacks the potential to evolve into a Vasta Lord, after reaching the bottleneck, it is meaningless to devour more hollows. Ain turned in his chair, looked at Aizen approaching. and slowly spread out his right hand. Whoosh! In the dim room, a bead shimmering with a dreamy luster flew toward Aizen. This is to be expected. It is nothing but a defective product and a consumable. The amount of spiritual power it can hold is very limited. As for the Horn of Minos Grand, it is just material for pseudo-shinigami. Ajusha's is already at its peak. Aizen received the bead with one hand. When he sensed with his spiritual pressure that this small bead contained Mugurumakin-size spiritual pressure, there was no surprise or disappointment on his face. In the end, I created the Horned Minos Grand and placed it in District 80 to hunt souls and test the hollowification of Shinigami. This bead is merely a container for storing spiritual pressure, used to hold the spiritual power gained by the Horned Minos Grand devouring souls. Even if the Horned Minos Grand is unfortunately killed by a Shinigami and lost, it doesn't matter. Mugurumakin-size spiritual pressure is, at best, just a lunch for Hogyoku. With a hollow like that and a container like this, I can always make more. As he spoke, he took out a gem shimmering with blue-black light from his pocket, then placed the bead handed over by Ain on Hogyoku. TSK. The bead immediately floated above Hogyoku. Streams of light surged out crazily and poured into Hogyoku. No. It should be said that all the spiritual pressure inside the bead was absorbed by Hogyoku. His greatest value is not in collecting Mugurumakin-size spiritual pressure. Ain wasn't surprised at this scene. Clearly. Whether it was Minos Grand, the horned creature he met in District 80, or the matter of Hogyoku, he knew everything. Indeed. A lucky one carrying Soul King fragments, a child who naturally has the potential to become a Captain Imperial Guard. I went to the Shino Academy to see them today. Yes, after a year and a half, they should be fully qualified to take on the role of lieutenant. Aizen chuckled softly, his words chilling. When I created the Horned Minos Grand, in order to hunt more efficiently and find useful hollow materials, I specifically enhanced its sensory nerves and gave it an extraordinary perception of souls with powerful Shinigami spiritual pressure and Soul King fragments. Judging from today's results, the effect was far better than I expected. In terms of talent, the two children you brought back will definitely surpass Tosen Kaname in the future. Especially Akamaru Jin. I just don't know whether these two children are willing to become Sairi-Itai's lieutenants or our brother's lieutenant. As he spoke, his right hand brushed across the handle of Kyokusugetsu's sword. It seemed like an unintentional movement. But Ain knew this was not accidental, it was the outward expression of a king's will when he desired to eliminate a certain Shinigami. Chapter 124. Is she your Hogyoku? What color a piece of white paper will be painted depends on what kind of paint I want to use. Of course, Ain knew exactly what Aizen meant by forcing the king. If Matsumoto Rinjaku and Akamaru Jin chose to become Sairi-Itai's lieutenants, then find an opportunity to kill them. If they chose to become his lieutenants, then keep them. That's right. Aizen nodded in agreement. Once he knew his brother understood his intentions, he dropped the subject. Frankly speaking, even if Akamaru Jin and Matsumoto Rinjaku truly insisted on becoming Sairi-Itai's lieutenants in the future, he still had 10,000 ways to arrange them. What Matsumoto Rinjaku holds in her body is not an ordinary Soul King fragment, but a complete Soul King component. It's the fingertip of the Soul King. In other words, it allows the Hogyoku in your hand to evolve instantly. Together with the Soul King fragments obtained from the Kuachiki family, it may not be perfect, but it would definitely be close to a finished product. Ain suddenly spoke, his gaze meeting Aizen's eyes. Aizen, don't you want it? He knew the king's character. When he first mentioned Matsumoto Rinjaku and Akamaru Jin, he already sensed Aizen's murderous intent toward Matsumoto Rinjaku. I want it. After all, it determines whether you and I can break the boundaries of Shinigami. If I find the chance, I would take the Soul King's fingertip from her body without hesitation. In my eyes, as a Shinigami, Matsumoto Rinjaku herself does not possess value beyond the Soul King's fingertip, nor is she worthy of holding it. Her only role is as a temporary container for the Soul King's parts. But now, she belongs to you. Aizen did not avoid the question at all and looked directly into Ain's eyes. He frankly admitted that he wanted it, but he also acknowledged that compared to his relationship with Ain, even if it allowed the Hogyoku to evolve to near perfection, it was nothing. No. It should be said the two weren't even qualified to be compared. He always believed that feelings were just products fermented by hormones and time. They could exist, but their effect was limited to mere self-satisfaction, nothing more. When emotions become obstacles hindering progress, they should be cut off without hesitation. But before becoming a Shinigami, back in District 80, those early days of supporting each other had continuously influenced Aizen and changed his thoughts. Aizen was still the king who wanted to become a god and stand atop the sky. However, his thinking had slightly changed. If standing atop the sky meant sacrificing his relationship with Ain, he would rather give up becoming a god. Brother, Since you chose to let Matsumoto Rinjaku live rather than extract the Soul King's fingertip, you must have your reasons. No matter what the reason, I will allow her to continue existing in Soul Society as a Shinigami, even if that means passing up the Soul King's fingertip. But the prerequisite is that she must become your lieutenant. Not the lieutenant of 13 Division of Imperial Guards, that is her only value. If she exists in a form that fails to meet your expectations, I will erase her from Siriite AI at all costs, even if not a single spirit particle remains. Aizen glanced at Kyoka Suigetsu in his hand without a trace. No, it should be said, Demon Blade Muramasa. This was Aizen's birthday gift to him. It was also the first gift he received in Soul Society, and one of the reasons that prompted him to change his views and deeply value his relationship with Aizen. For this reason, he did not hesitate to give up letting the Hogyoku in his hand go further and did not feel any regret. It's different from Mother Soul King fragments that are incomplete and broken. The complete parts of the Soul King can grow on their own, whether by developing self-awareness or falling into others' hands. Don't you think that compared to a Hogyoku that must devour souls constantly and needs to be carefully fed, a Hogyoku with consciousness, thought, and emotion is more interesting, has greater evolutionary potential, and requires less worry? Aizen leaned back gently in his chair, speaking meaningfully. I see. Is she your Hogyoku? Hearing this, Aizen thought of certain secret information about the Quincy that he had investigated in recent days after becoming 1st Division Lieutenant. Thinking of this, a flash of understanding and realization passed through his eyes beneath his glasses. Obviously, he already understood that the reason Aizen kept Matsumoto Rinjaku was to create another Hogyoku. It's just that their views and forms of Hogyoku differed. The Hogyoku in Aizen's eyes existed as the gemstone in his hand, controlled entirely by his will. The Hogyoku in Aizen's eyes existed in the form of Matsumoto Rinjaku, in the form of a Shinigami. The gem form was easy to control, but it lacked self-growth. Before reaching an ideal level, it needed to be fed large amounts of souls and spiritual power, or even other Hogyoku, Soul King fragments, or Soul King parts to push it forward. The Shinigami form had the ability to grow independently, advancing through practice. Just like Perny Deparnges, Gerard Valkyrie, and Leobaro in the Stern Ritter, Soul King parts that evolved through their own practice to a level surpassing 13 Division of Imperial Guards. In the former case, it required constant effort and feeding. In the latter case, it could be left alone to grow or occasionally nourished to accelerate its progress. A second Hogyoku? Interesting. This way of creating a Hogyoku is indeed just like you. Aizen looked quite happy. He had originally planned to help Aizen create a second Hogyoku after finishing the one in his hand. Now it was no longer necessary. After learning that Aizen also had plans to create a Hogyoku, he completely extinguished his intent to kill Matsumoto Rinjaku. If his initial reason for letting Matsumoto Rinjaku live was out of respect and affection for Aizen, then now he could allow her to continue existing even aside from their brotherly bond. Because in his eyes, Matsumoto Rinjaku was no longer simply a Soul King fragment container, nor a waste of Soul King parts, but another Hogyoku in itself. It was Aizen's Hogyoku. It just existed in the form of a Shinigami, not a gem. At this moment, Aizen also had an idea in his mind. To compete with his brother, to see whose Hogyoku was more perfect? Was it the Hogyoku in his hand? Or Matsumoto Rinjaku in Aizen's hand? Just like their countless competitions in the past. Not necessarily. It's just out of a momentary curiosity. Will the seed I planted by chance bloom? And if it blooms, what kind of fruit will it bear? In truth, I don't even care. Compared to Hogyoku, I'm more pleased to hear what you just said to me. To be honest, the Hogyoku and Soul King parts mean nothing to me. I've never truly cared about these things. Seeing Aizen open up for the first time, Aizen also decided to confide in him. Even without Hogyoku or Soul King parts, I am confident that I can break the boundary between Shinigami and Hollow. You can consider it my boasting. But if you fail, I will lend you a hand and help you stand atop everything. His tone was very calm, as if he were talking about something as simple as lifting a finger. Even if that meant sending a king to the heavens with one hand. Taking the place of a god. Why? Aizen's expression didn't change, but his deep eyes rippled slightly. The kind of ripple invisible to the eye. Don't you think the answer lies within yourself? Aizen asked instead of answering. Aizen appeared slightly puzzled. Why didn't you allow Matsumoto Rinjaku to exist in a form that failed to live up to my expectations? Aizen asked again. Upon hearing this, Aizen froze slightly, as if realizing that what he had just said was inconsistent with his character and style. Thinking this through, he fell silent. After a while, he spoke again, changing the subject to his own Hogyoku. Even after absorbing Muguru Makinsai's spiritual pressure, this Hogyoku still didn't display the power I expected. It requires more spiritual power, At least dozens of spiritual pressure containers to satisfy it and push it further. Of course, Soul King fragments are also essential. Aizen glanced at the Hogyoku in his palm, then handed it over. What a glutton. Have all the Soul King fragments extracted from Kuachiki Jinrai, Koga, and the Kuachiki family been used up? Aizen reached out and took the Hogyoku, sensing the terrifying power contained within the small gem. The two had planned so much before, and they naturally wanted more than just a hollow feast at Kuachiki's house. Besides settling accounts with Kuachiki Jinrai, they also aimed to harvest the Soul King fragments. The Hogyoku in his hand was the culmination of the entire Kuachiki family's efforts and contributions. Chapter 125. The main point was not to waste as the head of the four noble houses. Although the Tsunayashiro family had been replaced in recent years, its heritage could not be underestimated. Sajun, Kuachiki Jinrai, and the Kuachiki branch family. Yes. Among the four noble houses, even the declining Shiba clan had its own main and branch families. Naturally, the Kuachiki family was no exception. After the hollow feast not long ago, except for Byakuya Kuachiki and those elders of the Kuachiki family who had long been stationed in Central 46, the rest of the clan, including all the Soul King fragments accumulated by the Kuachiki family over the years. All of it was used by Aizen to forge the Hogyoku. Those with Soul King fragments had them extracted, and those without fragments had their royal bloodline souls taken, to feed the Hogyoku after hollow experimentation. The main objective was to maximize value. It was precisely with the help of the Kuachiki family that the Hogyoku created by the two brothers. Without even using Matsumoto Rangeku's Soul King fingertip. Still reached a semi-finished level. Compared to the future Hogyoku made by Urahara Kisuke, it was not inferior. Perhaps even superior. This was merely the help from the Kuachiki family alone, one of the four great houses. Byakuya Kuachiki still holds some within him. He is Jinrai Kuachiki's beloved grandson. Without his knowledge, Jinrai continuously implanted Soul King fragments into him. Aizen's eyes flashed with deep contemplation. He seemed to be considering whether to feed the Hogyoku with Byakuya Kuachiki. This blade is already sharpened, just waiting to be used. Aizen reminded him calmly. Indeed. Jinrai Kuachiki has cultivated this for so many years. It's almost time. We only need to find an opportunity to use the power of the demon sword Muramasa to allow Byakuya Kuachiki to master Benkei, and then he can be used. It would be too wasteful to simply feed him to the Hogyoku. Upon hearing this, Aizen immediately abandoned the idea of feeding Byakuya to the Hogyoku. After all, whether collecting souls via Shinigami power or extracting Soul King fragments, Soul Society had ample resources. There was no need to kill the goose that lays golden eggs. The two brothers' thoughts were extremely aligned. The main point was not to waste. Of course, this was also based on the premise that Byakuya only had Soul King fragments in his body and did not possess complete Soul King parts. Otherwise, Aizen would have already taken action. Then let's handle Tsunayashiro first. It's time to settle this account. We can't let Kuachiki Jinrai wait too long down below. A cold gleam flashed in Aizen's eyes. How could he forget the Tsunayashiro family? Kuachiki Jinrai, who merely provided information, had ended up with almost the entire clan becoming fodder for the Hogyoku, subjected to hollow experimentation, nearly annihilated. As the true mastermind behind the assassination attempt on him and Aizen, the Tsunayashiro family certainly deserved a far worse fate. One could say. The script for the Tsunayashiro family had already been written. That's fine. Anyway, these past days, Tsunayashiro Tokunada has been living each day in fear and trepidation. If he knew he could finally go on his final journey, he might even feel relieved. Aizen smiled slightly after hearing this. But his smile, like Aizen's eyes, was ice-cold and bone-chilling. Fear and anxiety? Yes. As one of the masterminds behind the Shino Academy dormitory attack. After the hollow incident at the Kuachiki estate, Tsunayashiro Tokunada had initially been stunned, shocked, and disbelieving. But soon after, fear, unease, and anxiety consumed him day after day. The fate of Jinrai Kuachiki hung above him like the sword of Damocles, making him live each moment as if treading on thin ice. Although alive, he was constantly tormented by terror. Drowning in such an ocean of negative emotions, no matter how strong one's will, they would eventually go mad or collapse. Tsunayashiro residence. Did those old fools from Central 46 refuse again? Tsunayashiro Tokunada sat in the main seat, glancing coldly at Yamada Sanosuke kneeling before him. Apologies, Lord Tokunada. The sages and judges of Central 46 rejected your request again, on the grounds that the Great Spirit Book Gallery is a restricted area of Soul Society. Wearing a white robe and a white medical cap, Yamada Sanosuke looked more like a noble doctor than a healer. He half knelt respectfully, his voice helpless. This happened once, then twice. Now already a third time. How dare they? I am from the Tsunayashiro family. Tsunayashiro Tokunada tried hard to suppress his fury. This was the third time Central 46 had rejected his application to enter the Great Spirit Book Gallery. According to Central 46, the Tsunayashiro family's duty is to guard and manage the Great Spirit Book Gallery, not to read it. Furthermore, they claim only the current head and the first heir of the Tsunayashiro family have the qualifications to enter and apply to study the records. Yamada Sanosuke's words made Tokunada's eyes turn ferocious like a beast, his breathing heavy and ragged. First heir? At that moment, Tsunayashiro Tokunada's eyes became savage, his aura like a caged beast on the verge of rampage. Originally, ever since the Kuachiki Estate Hollow incident, he had lived every day and night in fear of An and Dazen. Now, Central 46 had rejected him 3 times in a row, striking straight at his sorest spot. This was equivalent to a brutal kick to someone already on the edge of madness. Very well. Then let's do it. Suddenly, Tsunayashiro Tokunada calmed down abruptly from his rage, even showing a smile again. Lord Tokunada, are you truly going through with it? According to the original plan, we still need at least 100 years of accumulation. Yamada Sanosuke's expression changed drastically. Did you not see what happened to Jinrai Kuachiki? Hollowification, death. Even his only surviving grandson has become Aon's subordinate. What a joke. The dignified new head of the Kuachiki family was reduced to a subordinate of a mongrel. I refuse to end up like Kuachiki Jinrai. Tsunayashiro Tokunada's tone was icy as frost. When he mentioned Kuachiki's fate, even after so much time, his voice still carried deep lingering fear. But, I've secretly investigated countless times. I've entered the Kuachiki estate under various pretexts, been to the Senzaku, even joined the First Division. Not only is there no evidence, there aren't even 10 clues pointing at them. All the facts prove that Aon and Aizen have no involvement with hollowification at all. Everything was orchestrated by Koga and Hiroko Shinji. Yamada Sanosuke hesitated before voicing this argument. Ha ha ha. If this were about anyone else, I might believe it. But who is Kuachiki Jinrai? The man who single-handedly pushed the Kuachiki family to the peak of the noble hierarchy. No one cherished their reputation more than him. There are many ways to seek higher realms, there is no need to choose hollow experiments, which invite endless catastrophe. Tsunayashiro Tokunada laughed bitterly. He had worked alongside Jinrai for many years. How could he not understand Jinrai's character? Hollow experiments were nothing but a ticking time bomb. Once detonated, they wouldn't only destroy the practitioner, but also obliterate the entire Kuachiki family. Instead of resorting to hollowification, it would have been far better to patiently collect Soul King fragments. Though the process was long, it was safe, provided great benefits, and had no after-effects. Most importantly, when Jinrai eventually died, the Kuachiki family would be securely cemented as the leading noble house. It was absolutely impossible for Jinrai to involve himself in hollow experiments. Chapter 126, Thanks to him, I was able to ensure that you would have no descendants. Maybe it's Koga's revenge. Even if Kuachiki Jinrai did not participate in the hollow experiment, Koga could still conduct it on his own. It's no secret that he always wanted to stand out and show off in the Kuachiki family. Yamada Sanosuke still felt that Tsunayashiro Tokunada was scaring him. As a doctor, he even believed that Tsunayashiro, like Hiroko Shinji, suffered from paranoia and persecution complex toward Aon. Koga? He's just an ordinary Shinigami who was lucky enough to obtain a fragment of the Soul King. Hollow experiments. Is that power something a mere person can touch? Seeing that Yamada Sanosuke still didn't believe him and even wanted to continue persuading, Tsunayashiro Tokunada, tormented by the fear and unease of the past few days, immediately roared impatiently, "Do as I say. Whether it's my fault or yours, it will be clear when the time comes. Understood? Yamada." Director. Hearing the murderous intent in Tsunayashiro Tokunada's words, and realizing the other party was completely insane, Yamada Sanosuke didn't say anything more. He stood up and walked out silently. Aizen. I am not Kuachiki Jinrai. I won't be dealt with by you so easily. If you want to blame something, blame your choice. If you had chosen Tsunayashiro first, perhaps you and your brother would have been the final winners. After all, in Kuachiki Jinrai's eyes, I am someone who would pursue power at any cost. Even if I got involved in hollow experiments, it wouldn't be surprising. Tsunayashiro Tokunada whispered to himself, his voice twisted and chilling, pity. Soul Society has everything. Except if. With Yamada Sanosuke gone, no one knew. That night. What enveloped the Tsunayashiro family was not only night, but also blood. The next day. In a spacious hall with simple, elegant decoration and wooden pillars carved with mysterious reliefs, Tsunayashiro Hideaki sat in the main seat, along with 6 clan elders, all positioned in the center of the hall. Tokunada, you said you had something concerning the life and death of the family to report, and that both the clan leader and patriarch had to be present. Alright, now we're all here. Can you speak now? Tsunayashiro Hideaki looked down at Tsunayashiro Tokunada, who was standing in the hall. Clan leader Hideaki, elders. I wonder if Tsunayashiro having no heir would be considered the death of the family? Tsunayashiro Tokunada lowered his head, his face twisted in a sinister smile. Ridiculous. Have you gone mad from solitary confinement? There are so many heirs of our Tsunayashiro family that they could line up from this hall to your doorstep. How could there be no heir? You gathered all of us here just to say such absurd words? Tsunayashiro Tokunada, I think your confinement time wasn't enough. Do you want to taste it again? After hearing what Tokunada said, before Tsunayashiro Hideaki could even respond, the other elders were already rebuking him harshly. Nothing else. Just because Tsunayashiro was different from other noble families. Any direct family member could become heir, and Tsunayashiro Tokunada was no exception. Unfortunately, he ranked at the very bottom. In other words, he had to wait until everyone else was gone before it would be his turn. Tsunayashiro Tokunada, is this what you gathered us for? Tsunayashiro Hideaki, who was sitting in the main seat, wasn't angry but felt an inexplicable unease suddenly rising in his heart. Of course. But that's not all. Tsunayashiro Tokunada raised his head, revealing a face twisted with a gloomy smile, then lifted his hand and clapped. Clack. The doors opened in response, and then figures dressed entirely in black appeared one after another, with only their eyes exposed. They came in pairs, each carrying a stretcher. On each stretcher lay a body, covered with blood-stained white cloth, faces hidden. What is the meaning of this? When Tsunayashiro Hideaki saw this scene, the unease in his heart instantly spiked, and he couldn't help but stand up from his seat. Clan leader, elders. Would you mind stepping forward and taking a look at yourselves? Then you will understand why I said Tsunayashiro is on the verge of life and death. The corners of Tsunayashiro Tokunada's mouth curved into a long, slanted arc, his smile growing increasingly sinister. Hearing this, Tsunayashiro Hideaki and the others hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward, each choosing a stretcher. They lifted the blood-stained white cloth one by one. Rinasuke. Saburo. Nishian. Yaifeng. Although only 7 cloths were lifted, the faces revealed instantly turned the expressions of all the high-ranking members, including Tsunayashiro Hideaki, into masks of horror. Because without exception, these were all heirs of the Tsunayashiro family, their own sons, daughters, or nephews. Seeing their blood relatives dead before their eyes, they reached out trembling hands and ripped away all the remaining blood-stained clothes in one breath. Thud. A sound of heavy bodies collapsing to the ground echoed. Tsunayashiro Hideaki and the elders all collapsed on the floor. Facing this sudden banquet of blood, seeing the corpses of nearly all the family heirs placed before them, their once dignified faces were now only filled with pain and grief. Tsunayashiro Tokunada. Was it you who did this? After a while, Tsunayashiro Hideaki suddenly turned his head, his eyes like blades stabbing into Tokunada, filled with boundless fury and killing intent. If you mean them, yes, I killed them. Tsunayashiro Tokunada, far from afraid, nodded cheerfully, his face brimming with joy, pride, and an insane delight. You want to die? Guards. Tsunayashiro Tokunada is to be executed immediately. An elder who had lost his son roared in fury, calling for people to come and execute Tokunada. No, he must be cut into 1,000 pieces first. Tsunayashiro Hideaki spoke each word slowly, each syllable squeezed out through gritted teeth. It doesn't matter. Whether you steam or boil me, with so many heirs going to the grave with me, no, the entire Tsunayashiro family buried along with me. That's enough. Tsunayashiro Tokunada raised his hands as if surrendering, but his words shocked Tsunayashiro Hideaki, who was consumed by grief and rage. What do you mean? Seeing Tokunada remain so calm and unafraid of death, Tsunayashiro Hideaki felt a shadow fall heavily over his heart. Now that all the heirs are dead, I, Tsunayashiro Tokunada, am the only remaining successor. If you kill me, it will be equivalent to destroying the Tsunayashiro family with your own hands. Wouldn't that mean the entire family dies with me? Tsunayashiro Tokunada said calmly. I thought you had some grand scheme. Is this it? I'm not talented, only over 300 years old this year. I dare not say anything else, but having a few more children in my lifetime would not be a problem. Hearing this, an elder immediately sneered. It's a pity that you no longer have this ability. Tsunayashiro Tokunada shook his head, then called toward the door, Clan leader, elders. Please allow me to introduce, this is Yamada Sanosuke, director of Seijin Pharmacy Institute. Thanks to him, I was able to send all those heirs to hell in one move. Thanks to him, I was able to ensure that you would have no descendants. When they saw Yamada Sanosuke walk in, at first Tsunayashiro Hideaki and the elders didn't understand. But as Tokunada finished speaking, they stood up from the ground, only to collapse again. Bone-chilling coldness, shock, anger, and despair, helplessness and collapse filled their hearts. Chapter 127, In the end, Tsunayashiro Tokunada, won this round. Tsunayashiro Nagahara's expression was gloomy. When he looked at Tsunayashiro Tokunada, he wanted to cut him into pieces, steam them, and then eat them, but in the end, he could only endure it. Nothing else. Of course, he didn't believe Tsunayashiro Tokunada's claim that they had all lost the ability to have children. But the doctors raised within the family, the doctors invited from Sijin Pharmacy Institute, and even some members called in from the 4th Division all came to the same conclusion. Destroyed by a special poison. From the clan leader to the elders, the tools of everyone at the top of the Tsunayashiro family could still function, but they could no longer produce offspring. Although there were lieutenants in the 4th Division who were more skilled in healing arts, and even Ono Retsu herself, Tsunayashiro Nagahara did not dare to invite them. This was a scandal and a secret related to the Tsunayashiro family. How could it be leaked? Whether it was the doctors from Shino Pharmacy Institute or the members of the 4th Division, they could be silenced forever. But once Ono Retsu was called, if she could cure it, that was fine. But if she couldn't, what then? Why did you do this? Although you were last among the heirs, the family treated you well. Even when Shun Sakuraku went to Central 46 to accuse you, we still chose to keep you alive. Is this how you repay us? Tsunayashiro Nagahara took several deep breaths, barely resisting the urge to cut Tsunayashiro Tokunada into pieces with 1,000 cuts. Of course I'm grateful to you, otherwise I wouldn't have just killed your entire family and wiped out your bloodline, but instead let you all live well. Tsunayashiro Tokunada said shocking words. As for why I did this, if you want to blame someone, blame Ayan Sosuke and Aizen Sosuke. Seeing that the overall situation was set, Tsunayashiro Tokunada no longer concealed anything, and began to describe how he had joined forces with Kuichiki Jinrai, failed to assassinate the Sosuke brothers, and everything that had happened afterward. What? You said the Kuichiki family was destroyed by the Ayan brothers? That's simply absurd. Fine, even if what you said is true, if you just wanted to enter the Great Spirit Book Gallery, why didn't you tell us? Why commit such an unforgivable crime? After learning the reason for Tsunayashiro Tokunada's betrayal, the clan leaders and elders present were so furious they almost vomited blood. That's it. Because of suspicion toward the Ayan brothers and fear of revenge, he killed all the heirs of the family. This reason for rebellion was truly impossible to guard against. In their opinion, Tsunayashiro Tokunada only needed to report to the family, and then the clan leader would enter the Great Spirit Book Gallery, and the truth would become clear. After all, the Great Spirit Book Gallery had nothing to do with Shinigami will. It compulsorily collected and recorded all data and information of Soul Society. There was no possibility of falsification. Precisely because of this, the Great Spirit Book Gallery was an absolute forbidden area of Siri Itai, even more important than Central 46. Even the head of the Tsunayashiro family, who was responsible for managing the Great Spirit Book Gallery, had to notify Central 46 and obtain approval before he could enter to view information. But in the eyes of Tsunayashiro Hideaki and the others, this was not betrayal at all. Ayan is just one of the reasons. Killing all the heirs was my original plan. Now, it was merely advanced by 100 years. Tsunayashiro Tokunada's words made the clan leader and elders want to peel his skin off alive, but they could do nothing. Once they did, hundreds of years later, the Tsunayashiro family would truly become extinct. This was also why Tsunayashiro Tokunada was so confident. For nobles, especially the 4 great noble houses, lineage inheritance was more important than anything else, while personal honor or disgrace was nothing. Especially after seeing the precedent of the Shiba family's decline. An hour later, the news that Tsunayashiro Tokunada had become the first successor spread throughout the Tsunayashiro main and branch houses. But no one knew about the murder of the heirs and the poisoning of the clan leader and elders. In order to avoid attracting the attention of the 13th Division of Imperial Guards and even other nobles, the top leaders of the Tsunayashiro family chose to keep everything secret. Having obtained the identity he wanted, Tsunayashiro Tokunada did not choose to indulge himself and enjoy the power brought by being the sole heir. Instead, he immediately submitted another application to Central 46 to enter the Great Spirit Book Gallery. With the change in identity, the reply he received this time was no longer a rejection but approval. Aizen. In the end, Tsunayashiro Tokunada, won this round. After hearing from Yamada Sanosuke that Central 46 had permitted him to enter the Great Spirit Book Gallery, Tsunayashiro Tokunada could no longer suppress the ecstasy in his heart and burst into wild laughter. At this moment, the fear, Unease, worry, and even despair that had tormented him day and night were all gone. When Yamada Sanosuke on the side saw this, he did not feel happy. Instead, he felt an inexplicable sense of foreboding. If, upon entering the Great Spirit Book Gallery, Tsunayashiro Tokunada discovered that the Ain brothers had nothing to do with the hollow incident at the Kuichiki family, he couldn't imagine what kind of expression Tokunada would show. He might truly go mad. Moreover, the assassination of the heirs, moved forward by 100 years, might seem like a lucky success, but in reality, it was extremely risky. According to the original plan, he would have laid low for 100 years, accumulated enough strength to overthrow the top leaders of the Tsunayashiro family, and then acted. But now, acting hastily and moving troops dangerously had indeed succeeded, but Yamada Sanosuke knew that all of this was only temporary and would bring endless consequences. Because Tsunayashiro Tokunada did not have enough strength to confront the top leaders of the Tsunayashiro family. Once things calmed down, once the clan leader and elders regained composure, once they found medicine or a method to cure the sterilization, what awaited Tsunayashiro Tokunada would be only one outcome. Worse than death. Sanosuke, go and inform Yamamoto Genri Uzai. Tell him to come to the Great Spirit Book Gallery immediately. In front of him, I want to reveal with my own hands the true identity of Ain Sosuke, whom he regards as a Shinigami hero, and his most beloved disciple, Aizen Sosuke. I want to see with my own eyes how he cuts down his loved ones in the name of justice. Tsunayashiro Tokunada did not care what Yamada Sanosuke thought. At this moment, he was immersed in the joy of seizing great power and standing above the Ain brothers. Yes. Besides Shun Sekiraku, Yukitake Joshiro, and the father of Amagai Shujuku, Tsunayashiro Tokunada was also once a disciple of Yamamoto Genri Uzai Shigakuni. However, after killing Tosen Kaneme's best friend, Tsunayashiro Utamaro, he was reported to Central 46 by Shun Sekiraku. Not only was he placed under house arrest, but he was even expelled by Yamamoto Genri Uzai himself. This made him deeply hate the Ain brothers, who were valued and loved by Yamamoto Genri Uzai. Lord Tokunada, do you not want to verify the truth first? What if, after entering the Great Spirit Book Gallery, you discover that the Ain brothers had nothing to do with the hollow experiment at the Kuichiki family? How will you explain it to Captain Yamamoto then? Also, the clan leaders and elders will have even greater resentment toward you after they find out. Seeing Tsunayashiro Tokunada so impatient and rash, no longer as calm and patient as he had imagined, Yamada Sanosuke for the first time felt a sense of regret for cooperating with him. In his opinion, even if Yamamoto Genri Uzai Shigakuni was to be used to deal with the Ain brothers, it should at least be based on having solid evidence. But now, before even entering the Great Spirit Book Gallery, with the outcome still unknown, Tsunayashiro Tokunada had already put on the face of a final victor and was asking him to call for Yamamoto Genri Uzai. This rash and arrogant performance only made him more resistant and dissatisfied. Chapter 128, As long as you don't die, I'll never have peace. Are you questioning me? Yamada Sanosuke. Facing Yamada Sanosuke's question, Tsunayashiro Tokunada, who had already become the first successor of the Tsunayashiro family, suddenly turned his head. His long, narrow eyes revealed a chilling murderous intent. Before, when he launched the rebellion and killed all the heirs of the Tsunayashiro family, he still called Yamada Sanosuke director, showing full respect and courtesy. But now, after the fear of the past few days, combined with the suppressed madness from 100 years of house arrest, and finally succeeding, he no longer had any of the previous courtesy or politeness. No. I don't dare. The moment Yamada Sanosuke looked into Tsunayashiro Tokunada's eyes, he felt a coldness run through his entire body. It was as if he were being stared at by a lion emerging from the grass. At this moment, he finally woke up and couldn't help but laugh bitterly in his heart. This is nobility? Truly. Knowing too much, your value plummets, and your status changes. There is no turning back. If you don't dare, then hurry up and go. Don't forget, you and I are already in the same boat. If I collapse, you won't escape either. Only by defeating Ain can you and I have a good life. Do you understand? Tsunayashiro Tokunada took a deep breath, suppressing the killing intent filling his eyes. A sinister smile appeared on his face once more. Whether he realized he had lost his temper, or felt that Yamada Sanosuke was still useful, no one knew. One moment murderous, the next moment smiling. This sudden change made Yamada Sanosuke feel deep fear. But the bow was already drawn, there was no turning back. At this point, even if he had seen through Tsunayashiro Tokunada's true nature, he could only continue moving forward. Yes, I will inform the head captain immediately. Yamada Sanosuke suppressed the chill in his heart, turned, and retreated. As he left, he didn't notice that when Tsunayashiro Tokunada, who had been smiling just now, looked at his departing back, his eyes once again showed a cold, murderous intent. Are you disobeying me? Who do you think you are? You're just a lowly worm. If you didn't have any use left, I would have killed you long ago. Tsunayashiro Tokunada watched Yamada Sanosuke's figure disappear, then sneered, flicked his sleeves, and turned to walk towards Central 46. The most urgent task was to cut off the Aeon sword hanging above his head. As long as the brothers were alive, he would have no peace. In order not to alert anyone, Tsunayashiro Tokunada traveled lightly and even concealed his spiritual pressure. It wasn't until he entered Central 46 that he resumed his swagger. Clearly. In his eyes, once he stepped into Central 46, his safety was guaranteed, and at the same time, Aeon had already entered the countdown to death. With the approval of Central 46, Tsunayashiro Tokunada was not stopped by the hidden Shinigami, and passed through unhindered. He first passed through the central underground assembly hall, then walked directly into the depths below under the watchful eyes of the Onmitsukido hidden in the shadows, and the Tsunayashiro clan guard stationed there for generations. After passing through the Kido barriers and technological gates, his originally dim vision suddenly became bright, and the space expanded from narrow to incredibly vast. Clearly underground, yet the Great Spirit Book Gallery was incredibly huge, like an underground palace. It was surrounded by towering bookshelves, countless books inside, all recording the history and information of the Soul Society. In the center of the Great Spirit Book Gallery stood an instrument similar to a central control console, used for searching, retrieving, and reviewing historical records. Retrieve all information on Aeon Sosuke and Aizen Sosuke. This was also Tsunayashiro Tokunada's first time here. He couldn't help but be shocked by the vast database before him. Facing the Great Spirit Book Gallery, he felt as if he were facing the entire history of Soul Society, deeply shaken. However, remembering his purpose, he forcibly pulled himself out of that ocean of history, then quickly walked to the control console. As the first successor of the Tsunayashiro family, he naturally knew how to operate it. Whoosh! 2 books placed in a corner of the bookshelf suddenly disappeared. The next second, they appeared out of thin air in front of the console. As the books opened, scenes emerged one after another, like an immersive 3D movie. All of Aeon's deeds since arriving in Soul Society played out like a film. Found it. Tsunayashiro Tokunada was so excited that he couldn't help but sit down, watching the Aeon brothers past in detail. At first, he watched with great interest, like a god's perspective, looking down from above. But gradually, as he saw Aeon entering the Shino Academy and beginning to make history, his expression gradually became serious. Enrolled as the strongest genius in 2000 years in the Shino Academy's first class, unsealed state, instantly mastering Zanpakuto, defeating Hirako Shinji using only swordsmanship, after just 5 days of classes. He had already mastered all the necessary Shinigami skills to graduate from the academy. Graduated in January, defeated Hirako Shinji in front of the 5th Division barracks, and overwhelmed first-generation Kenpachi Anohana Yachiru. With only kendo. Just from seeing this much, Tsunayashiro Tokunada was already completely shocked. As the images continued, he saw the 1st Division conference hall, the Aeon brothers playing with all the captains in the palm of their hands, suppressing dozens of captains Zanpakuto with a snap of their fingers, then at the execution grounds suppressing Koga, and the hollow feast at the Kuachiki residence, etc. Seeing everything the Aeon brothers had done with this godlike perspective, his first reaction was not the excitement of having grasped their weakness, but an unprecedented chill spreading throughout his body. His whole body turned cold. Goosebumps rose. They actually did it. Aeon. Aizen. These two. The 13th Division of Imperial Guards, no, the entire Syriite AI has become their brother's plaything. From the Captain Commander, the 4 noble families, to the Captain's Imperial Guard and top officers, all are living inside the false world spun by these 2 brothers. Those who doubted them died miserably, those without doubt live in illusions. Tsunayashiro Tokunada slumped in the chair, his face pale as paper, his eyes vacant, muttering constantly. He had always prided himself on ruthless methods and deep scheming, otherwise he would never have been able to seize the seat as the final heir of Tsunayashiro, succeeding in the end. But after seeing the information on the Aeon brothers' infiltration of Syriite AI, he realized that the methods he had once been proud of were nothing but clownish tricks. The strongest Shinigami in 1,000 years, Yamamoto Genryu's Ishigakuni, had been deceived up to this point. Muguru Makinsai, Atrabashi Rojiro, and the other Captain's Imperial Guard had all been played with and confused about friend or foe. Koga and Hirako Shinji were already dead, and yet they still bore the blame for everything. Kuachiki Jinrai, and the tragedy of the Kuachiki family. Everything. Absolutely everything. Even watching it with a god's perspective, he felt immersed, as if he were present in the scene, making his bones cold and his hair stand on end. Aeon, as long as you don't die, I'll never have peace. Chapter 129, Could it be that everything I'm doing right now is under their watch? Ain't sosk. Aizen sosk. I won't feel at ease until you die. Tsunayashiro Tokunada sat slumped weakly, as if completely drained by fear. His pale face was covered with tiny beads of sweat, his back soaked and dripping, his clothes completely wet, yet he didn't notice at all. He kept murmuring, repeating these words over and over again. Suddenly, from the corner of his eye, he noticed that the picture in the book in front of him suddenly changed, switching to a very familiar scene. At a quick glance, he seemed to have seen it somewhere before. After looking carefully, his eyes suddenly shrank to the size of pinholes. The man who had just been sprawled out on the chair like a limp snake now jumped up like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. This is the Central Underground Assembly Hall. Tsunayashiro Tokunada stared at the scene in front of him. How could he not recognize it? He had just passed by the upper level before entering the Great Spirit Book Gallery. Central Underground Assembly Hall. Seeing Brother Rain appear so close to him, even though it was only recorded in the Great Spirit Book Gallery, it still gave him the illusion that Ayan was standing right next to him. Just as he was trying his best to suppress this restless feeling, he suddenly heard the conversation between the two people in the picture. It's time to settle this account. If we let him go on the road, I think he would be extremely happy to know about it. As soon as he saw this scene, the picture suddenly stopped and the sound cut off abruptly. It seemed that the later history and further intelligence were still being recorded, and no picture had been generated yet. However, before the picture and sound disappeared, the last conversation between the Ain brothers made Tsunayashiro Tokunada's entire body tremble, his heart skipping a beat violently. No. Aizen's Zanpakuto ability is Kyoka Suigetsu, the strongest illusion type's Zanpakuto. No, it's not just that anymore. Ain took Muramasa from Koga and gave it to Aizen. After pouring soul lessons into it, it evolved into the demon sword Muramasa, and even further evolved together with Kyoka Suigetsu. Although I haven't seen his Shikei, since he has already targeted me, is it possible that, just like Koga, Hirako Shinji, and Kuichiki Jinrai, I've been watching this whole time without knowing it? They want to deal with me, and they also know that I've been living in fear. Could it be that everything I'm doing right now is under their watch? Tsunayashiro Tokunada couldn't help but swallow hard, then began turning on the spot frantically, his neck twisting wildly, his eyes darting around the Great Spirit Book Gallery, as if he was afraid Ain might be standing right next to him. No, the Tsunayashiro family rarely moves around Siriite AI, because they're responsible for managing the Great Spirit Book Gallery. They almost never even go to 13 Division of Imperial Guards. Almost no one in the entire clan has ever seen Kyoka Suigetsu's release. It's impossible for Brother Rain to silently infiltrate the Tsunayashiro family and spy on me. Also, those two brothers are just humans, not gods. It's impossible for them to have a flawless plan, and it's even more impossible for them to know out of thin air that I launched a coup last night, killed all the heirs, seized the identity of first successor, obtained the qualification to enter the Great Spirit Book Gallery, and planned to move against them today. Suddenly, a flash of clarity came to Tsunayashiro Tokunada's mind. Combined with the information he saw about the Ain brothers, he realized that he had never had direct contact with them, meaning it was impossible for him to have been caught in Kyoka Suigetsu's complete hypnosis. Then, even if Ain wanted to act against him, it wouldn't be so fast. What he needed to do was to act first before the Sosuke brothers could make a move and expose everything about them. At that point, Yamamoto Genryu's Ishigakuni, and even the enraged 13 Division of Imperial Guards, would deal with them. Thinking about this, Tsunayashiro Tokunada let out a long breath, and his sweaty face finally showed an expression of relief. Are you looking for us? Tsunayashiro Tokunada. No. You should be called the young clan head of Tsunayashiro now. In the silent hall, a voice sounded in Tsunayashiro Tokunada's ear. The voice wasn't loud, nor was the tone serious, but when it fell into his ears it was like thunder exploding on the ground, causing his blood to surge and his heart to nearly stop. Illusion. This must be an illusion. The pressure. Too much pressure. Tsunayashiro Tokunada turned his stiff neck, following the direction of the voice. What he saw were only towering bookshelves and countless books. Within this vast Great Spirit Book Gallery, there was no one else but him. Seeing this, he gradually relaxed, thinking he had accidentally pressed a button on the central console, thus triggering an audio recording. No, maybe it isn't an illusion. Look more closely. Young clan head Tokunada. A different voice rang out again. Come out. I know you're there. I recognize your voices. Tsunayashiro Tokunada suddenly turned around, pulled out the Zanpakuto in his right hand, and stared ferociously in the direction of the sound. Ain't Sosuke. Aizen Sosuke. Come out. Come out. Come out. Tsunayashiro Tokunada roared repeatedly, erupting dozens of bursts of spiritual pressure from all over his body, looking as if he would destroy everything if they didn't come out. At that moment, crack! A sound like shattering glass echoed in his ears. Then, he saw cracks appear in the view before him, like cracks in a mirror. The cracks quickly vanished, as if they had never existed. Immediately after, in the Great Spirit Book Gallery, 2 more figures had appeared. One leaned against a bookshelf, looking at him with interest. The other stood with his hands in his pockets, looking at him and chuckling. "It's really you." Tsunayashiro Tokunada's voice suddenly became extremely sharp, faintly revealing fear and panic. Even though he was holding the Zanpakuto passed down through generations of the Tsunayashiro family, it still couldn't bring him any sense of security. "We were right. Long time no see, young clan head Tokunada." Ain leaned lightly against the bookshelf, greeting Tsunayashiro Tokunada casually. Unlike Tokunada's frantic and crazed demeanor, Ain's face was filled with a relaxed, bright smile. "Impossible. When did you get here? Why didn't I notice at all?" Tsunayashiro Tokunada met Ain's gaze, and it felt as though he was being stared at by a ferocious beast. His entire body tensed, and then his feet unconsciously stepped backward. Before, when Ain had just entered the Shino Academy, Tokunada still had the confidence and arrogance of looking down from above, feeling he could crush them at any time. Now, after seeing the brothers' records in the Great Spirit Book Gallery, learning about their methods, deeply understanding their power, he no longer felt like he was facing powerful enemies, but rather a nightmare. Even when Aim simply greeted him, it filled him with unease, as if he were facing a catastrophe. Chapter 130, Since when did you start thinking you'd never seen the release of Kyoka Suigetsu? We've always been here. From the moment you stepped into the Great Spirit Book Gallery, retrieved the information about Aizen and me, and watched our past. We were right there, just like you, appreciating and reminiscing over this historical feast. Seeing Tsunayashiro Tokunada unconsciously retreating, Ain's eyes behind the rimless glasses curved slightly with a hint of amusement. "Impossible. Without the permission of Central 46, even Yamamoto Genryu's Ishigakuni wouldn't be able to come here. Plus, there are the Tsunayashiro family gatekeepers stationed at the entrance." Upon hearing this, Tsunayashiro Tokunada instinctively refused to believe it. "Didn't you already see it? You saw it yourself in the history and information recorded in the Great Spirit Book Gallery. Whether it's the Central Underground Assembly Hall or the Great Spirit Book Gallery, for us, it's no different from returning home." Seeing Tsunayashiro Tokunada still trying to deceive himself, Ain couldn't help but shake his head and chuckle. "No, you're lying. I've never met you in person, so there's no way I could have seen Kyoka Suigetsu's release. Whether you were following me or hiding in the Great Spirit Book Gallery, there's no way I wouldn't have noticed." Tsunayashiro Tokunada roared over and over again, as if only his rage could conceal the fear devouring his heart. "Then let me ask you again. Since when did you start thinking you'd never seen the release of Kyoka Suigetsu? Young clan head Tokunada." At this moment, Aizen was still smiling, but his eyes were filled with a cold, oppressive glint. "Don't try to mess with my judgment. Aizen Sosuke. Since you know that I learned everything about you through the Great Spirit Book Gallery, you should also know that I have a certain understanding of Kyoka Suigetsu's ability. That sword is indeed terrifying, but its terror is based on the prerequisite of seeing its release." Tsunayashiro Tokunada went over it again in his mind. He had never seen the Ain brothers before, so it was naturally impossible for him to have seen Kyoka Suigetsu's release. "Yes, the Great Spirit Book Gallery gave you a certain understanding of Kyoka Suigetsu, but it only gave you a superficial understanding. You know nothing about my personal abilities, Aizen Sosuke. Even with the Great Spirit Book Gallery as a reference, you are still ignorant. Your vision is so shallow and laughable." Aizen was thoroughly amused by Tsunayashiro Tokunada. "You said you've never met me, never seen Kyoka Suigetsu's release. But have you considered that what you think you know might itself be an illusion? I woe for you. To tell you the truth, as long as I wish, I have 10,000 ways to make you fall into Kyoka Suigetsu's complete hypnosis without you ever realizing it. Young clan head Tokunada, do you really believe that the so-called hypnosis ceremony must involve me appearing before you, being seen by you, holding the Zanpakuto, the blade pointing down, and chanting shatter, Kyoka Suigetsu, only then can I activate the hypnosis? That so-called complicated ritual. Do you think it's possible that I deliberately staged it and had it recorded in the Great Spirit Book Gallery so that everyone who saw it would have the same shallow understanding of Kyoka Suigetsu's hypnosis as you do?" Aizen spoke while slowly drawing his Zanpakuto. This action immediately put Tsunayashiro Tokunada on high alert. He glanced around from the corner of his eye, his spiritual pressure fully mobilized, terrified that another Aizen would suddenly appear beside him and stab him. "Don't be so tense. I just want to ask you, am I using Kyoka Suigetsu now?" Seeing this, The smile in Aizen's eyes grew even stronger. Tsunayashiro Tokunada didn't answer, but guarded everything around him warily. If you don't answer, I'll take it as your acknowledgement that I haven't used Kyokusugetsu. Aizen smiled. Poof. Tsunayashiro Tokunada's entire body twitches violently. He lowered his head and looked at the bloody blade tip piercing through his abdomen, his eyes full of disbelief. When he looked up at the spot where Aizen had just stood and found that he was still there. Then, when he turned his head to look behind, he saw another Aizen standing there. When you entered the Great Spirit Book Gallery. No. It should be said. When you ordered Yamada Sanosuke to assassinate the other heirs. Aizen corrected himself as he spoke. What? Tsunayashiro Tokunada's expression changed drastically. Shock surged through his heart so fiercely that he even forgot the pain of being pierced by the blade. He subconsciously wanted to deny it, but when the corner of his eye swept past Aizen's gaze in the distance, that teasing, indifferent look, there was a thunderous boom in his mind. Only then did he realize something. Long time no see, young clan head Tokunada. At this moment, Aizen suddenly spoke, those casual words striking Tsunayashiro Tokunada like a hammer blow, turning his face pale with horror. Are you thinking about what I just called you? You should. Your expression tells me. You finally realized and noticed the way I greeted you and addressed you. Aizen looked at Tsunayashiro Tokunada with a half-smile. Young clan head. Tsunayashiro Tokunada murmured, his body trembling slightly, as if struck by lightning. Just last night, he had launched the coup, killed all the heirs with Yamada Sanosuke's help, and only became the young clan head of the Tsunayashiro family an hour ago. At this moment, very few people in Siriate AI knew about it. In other words. Yes. Just as you're thinking. Since last night, we've been in the Tsunayashiro residence, right beside you, enjoying the fratricidal drama you orchestrated. Aizen nodded with a cheerful expression, his words once again shocking Tsunayashiro Tokunada until his face turned deathly pale, his body trembling violently. He. Tsunayashiro Tokunada suddenly laughed. That deep laughter, besides the fear and unease, carried more self-mockery. So he had thought everything was flawless, that he could even outplay the Aizen brothers in this round, yet he never realized every move of his had been watched by the other side from beginning to end, right beside him, and he hadn't noticed at all. You win this round. Tsunayashiro Tokunada forced a bitter smile for a moment, but then suddenly raised his head, the bitterness twisting into a vicious grin, but your victory wasn't complete enough. At some point, his hand had already gripped the tip of Kyokusugetsu's blade protruding from his abdomen, and black mist began to rise. Aizen, standing behind, showed a slight change in expression, as if he sensed something. You were still careless, it should be said, you weren't careless. After all, how could low-born strays from Rakongai possibly know the power of the Zanpakuto passed down through the Tsunayashiro family for generations? Tsunayashiro Tokunada gripped his Zanpakuto tightly with hands shrouded in black mist. At the same time, he turned his head and neck, twisted around, and looked sideways at Aizen behind him. This sword is very useful, but also extremely dangerous. There have been many generations of clan heads who chose not to wield it, so no one would know its ability. Do you know? The only thing you did wrong was letting me enter the Great Spirit Book Gallery, allowing me to read your information and learn your abilities. To drink the seas, to hold the ends of the world, to cover and override all things, to sever the mirror's reflection. Chapter 131, Watching your brother die in front of you, yet unable to do anything. Sip from the four seas, the heavenly shores entwine. Equally duplicate 10,000s, and sharpen. As Tsunayashiro Tokunada shouted out the release phrase and in Rakuten's name, the blade of the Zanpakuto in his hand immediately disappeared, leaving only the hilt. At the same time, the hand that grabbed Aizen's blade, which had originally only released a wisp of black mist, now seemed to have opened a floodgate. A large amount of black smoke surged out, not only wrapping Aizen's Kyokusugetsu, but even covering Aizen himself in deep black mist. This is... Trapped in the darkness, Aizen's expression changed drastically as he felt his Zanpakuto being suppressed. Kyokusugetsu's abilities couldn't be used. The ability of the demon sword Muramasa couldn't be used either. Neither Shikai nor Bankai. Your brother's Zanpakuto is really useful. Soul Society's first light and dark dual types Zanpakuto, and it is the strongest one. Even the demon swords Muramasa and Kyokusugetsu, the strongest pair of illusion-type swords, can be completely sealed. Tsunayashiro Tokunada grabbed Kyokusugetsu with one hand, tightly sealing Aizen's Zanpakuto abilities, making it impossible to use Shikai or Bankai. At the same time, he aimed at his heart, laser light. As golden light flashed at his fingertip, a laser beam shot out, first piercing Aizen's left chest, and then the Zanpakuto, caught from behind, pinned him down. Both his body and Zanpakuto abilities were suppressed in the darkness, leaving Aizen unable to move at all. Poof. Aizen's body trembled, a mouthful of blood mist spurted from his mouth, and the blood on his face quickly drained away. When Tsunayashiro Tokunada dispersed the surrounding darkness, Aizen had already collapsed to the ground. The left chest that had been pierced was like a spring, blood gushing out from the wound and quickly dyeing the central computer station blood red. Can't imagine it, can you? That you would die under your most beloved brother's Zanpakuto. Aizen Sosuke. Tsunayashiro Tokunada looked down at Aizen lying at his feet, and the corners of his mouth slowly lifted, revealing a sinister smile. Your sword. With his heart pierced, Aizen's words became scattered. He used all his strength to barely squeeze out a few words. My sword? You mean in Rakuten? Aizen, you're so smart. After seeing it once, you should know. This is Soul Society's oldest Zanpakuto, even older than Yamamoto Genryu's Ishigakuni's Rijinjaka. The ability is exactly as you experienced. It can imitate all Zanpakuto abilities I know, your brother's Kafuin, your Kyoka Suigetsu, even Yamamoto Genryu's Ishigakuni's Rijinjaka. Tsunayashiro Tokunada seemed very satisfied with Aizen's expression at this moment. He said triumphantly in a victor's tone. So, you can die in peace. As he spoke, he raised his right foot, aimed at the wound on Aizen's left chest, and stomped hard. Only when the dying Aizen completely lost all traces of spiritual pressure and could no longer feel life did he stop with satisfaction. Watching your brother die in front of you, yet unable to do anything. Especially dying under your own power. How does it feel? After finishing Aizen, Tsunayashiro Tokunada turned to look at Aizen standing under the bookshelf in the distance. He reached out and touched the pierced abdomen in a provocative manner. The blood immediately turned into a faint spiritual pressure golden light, and the abdominal wound originally pierced by Kyoka Suigetsu instantly healed. Elementalization. It was also using the ability of Aizen's Zanpakuto. I can't hear your answer. Aizen Sosuke. What? Didn't expect me to come back? Didn't expect this ending? Didn't expect your brother to die in my hands? Tsunayashiro Tokunada didn't hear Aizen's voice, nor was he angry. Instead, he advanced step by step, constantly provoking, taunting, and cursing wantonly, as if trying to return the fear and uneasiness that these brothers had inflicted on him these past days tenfold. There are so many things you didn't expect. Two mere lowborns actually want to step on my head? So what if you control 13 division of Imperial Guards? Lowborns will always be lowborns. Your shallow vision can't see the vast history of Soul Society at all. Just like you could never foresee that the Zanpakuto you're so proud of would eventually become the sharp blade I used to kill your brother. Tsunayashiro Tokunada's tone became more and more arrogant, his voice higher and higher, as if he had already stepped on the Aizen brothers, no, the entire Soul Society under his feet. Are you finished? Aizen looked at Tsunayashiro Tokunada quietly, not interrupting his roars, not interrupting his howls, allowing him to show off his pride and arrogance. Only after the other party quieted down did he calmly respond. When Tsunayashiro Tokunada saw Aizen's calm eyes and composed face, as if the one who had just died wasn't his brother at all. This ultimate calmness, this terrifyingly calm reaction, made the manic laughter on his lips freeze. Aizen's reaction was completely different from what he expected. In his view, the man in front of him should have been stunned, shocked, in disbelief, and then furious. As your last words. If you have anything else to say, I can grant you a few more seconds. Consider it a reward for amusing me before you die. Aizen said calmly. Oh? It seems I still underestimated you, Aizen Sosuke. To be so calm even after witnessing your brother's tragic death. But that's fine, there's no need to grieve for too long. After all, you'll be reunited in hell soon enough. Tsunayashiro Tokunada put away the smile on his face, replacing it with a cold look and vicious eyes. He didn't like Aizen's calm performance that even made him feel a little fear. He liked seeing the other person look like Aizen lying in a pool of blood at his feet, with an expression of shock and despair, then die under his blade. Torch. Suddenly, a tornado of blazing flames rose from the ground beneath Aizen's feet. There was no warning, it appeared suddenly and extremely fast. Aizen didn't even have time to react before his entire body was engulfed by rolling flames reaching thousands of degrees. There wasn't even a chance to scream. I already told you, I can imitate both Kyoka Suigetsu and Rijinjaka. Oh. By the way, blame me. I actually forgot to tell you. In Rakuten not only can imitate all Zanpakuto abilities, but it can also use multiple Zanpakuto abilities at the same time. I'm really sorry that you, the strongest genius in Soul Society for thousands of years, died so confusedly at the hands of Kyoka Suigetsu and Rijinjaka. Behind the flame tornado that engulfed Aizen, Tsunayashiro Tokunada slowly walked out, holding a Zanpakuto spitting out blazing flames. It was Rijinjaka of Yamamoto Genryu's Ishigakuni. No. It should be Kyoka Suigetsu plus Rijinjaka. Chapter 132, The Clown Showtime is over, you know? I can say that I am extremely grateful to you brothers. As my elder brother, you, Ain Sosk, gave me the Kafun with the strongest light and dark elements. As my younger brother, you, Aizen Sosk, taught me step by step how to use Kyoka Suigetsu before you died. Thank you for taking care of me, but I really have no way to repay you, so I can only let you brothers die without leaving any remains. Tsunayashiro Tokunada glanced at the central control console and at Aizen's corpse, lying in a pool of blood, completely devoid of spiritual pressure and breath. He swung his blade backhand, and flames raged out, burning the corpse. Aizen died under the Kafun. Ain died under the combined blade of Kyoka Suigetsu and Rijin Jakka. After seeing this scene and doing all this, he felt that the haze that had been lingering in his mind these past few days had completely dissipated. Holding the Zanpakuto of the strongest light and dark element, you have the ability to turn into pure elements and be immune to all physical attacks. I know this very clearly. But it's useless. Under Kyoka Suigetsu's complete hypnosis, you don't even have a chance to react, and in front of Rijin Jakka, the strongest heat type, your elementalization is meaningless. I didn't expect it. You brothers worked so hard, but in the end you only won the first half of the game. I was the one who had the last laugh. Tsunayashiro Tokunada. Turning his head and taking a deep look at the towering fire tornado that was still burning after devouring Ain, Tsunayashiro Tokunada's face once again showed a smile. Inform Yamamoto Genryu's Ishigakuni to resolve it? This is no longer necessary. Step on Aizen. Kill Ain with a blade. I, Tsunayashiro Tokunada, can do it all by myself. Puff. TSK. In that instant, a hand suddenly stretched out from within the massive fire tornado and seized the throat of Tsunayashiro Tokunada, who was dreaming of meeting Yamamoto Genryu's Ishigakuni and being praised by him. The fingers tightened and the arm exerted force. Tsunayashiro Tokunada's face instantly turned purple and blue. He wanted to resist, subconsciously wanting to use Rijin Jakka, but after Zanpakuto was swung out, it immediately exited from its released state. Returned to its sealed blade state. Seeing this scene, his pupils suddenly contracted, and the haze that had just been dispelled came rushing back, even more intense than before. However, he couldn't do anything except dangle in the air, helplessly swinging the Inrakuton that was no longer able to release its Shikai. Yes. The Zanpakuto in his hand, which had been passed down from generation to generation in the Tsunayashiro family, was completely suppressed and could no longer simulate any Zanpakuto ability. The clown showtime is over. Among the massive swirling fire tornado, a face slowly emerged, staring at Tsunayashiro Tokunada with deep, cold eyes. Ain. Looking at this familiar face that should have already been obliterated, Tsunayashiro Tokunada opened his mouth and wanted to speak, but the fingers tightening around his throat prevented him from even squeezing out a single word. He could only roar in horror inside his heart. Not even 1/5 of the surface temperature of the sun. You call this Rijin Jakka? In Yamamoto Genryu's Ishigakuni's hands, it is called Rijin Jakka. In your hands, it is at best a dancing plum blossom. Ain glanced at the flames covering his body that were still burning. He frowned slightly, showed a trace of disdain, then opened his mouth, and black mist curled up, turning into a bottomless black hole. It directly swallowed all the flame tornadoes that soared into the ceiling of the Great Spirit Book Gallery into his mouth. This scene made Tsunayashiro Tokunada's eyes widen in shock, frozen on the spot. Swallowing Rijin Jakka's flames in one move. Even if the temperature of the Rijin Jakka he simulated was only 1/6 of that in Yamamoto Genryu's Ishigakuni's hands, it was still a spiritual pressure flame of over 1,000 degrees, enough to melt the Hyro of an Ajusha's class Menos Grand in an instant, let alone a Shinigami without Hyro. But now, the Rijin Jakka he had simulated was actually swallowed by Ain. You seem surprised. Didn't I say you could simulate my Kafun? Are you not even capable of that level? Ain couldn't help but laugh when he saw Tsunayashiro Tokunada's terrified expression. Inrakuton. Indeed one of the oldest Zanpakuto in Soul Society. It is true that this Zanpakuto has the ability to simulate anything. But the stronger the Zanpakuto, the more it devours Shinigami's own power. Just like in Yamamoto Genryu's Ishigakuni's hands, the strongest heat type is the sun. In Hitsuge Ayatashiro's hands, the strongest ice type is the ice sculpture. Same. The same applies to Inrakuton. In Tsunayashiro Tokunada's hands, the simulated Rijin Jakka only had a temperature of around 1,000 degrees. In Tsunayashiro's hands, the simulated Kyoka Suigetsu was downright laughable. In Tsunayashiro's hands, the simulated Kafun was even more worthless. It's just gravel, not as good as me, yet still wants to control the Kafun. You like to imitate so much, don't you? Fine, since you said Aizen taught you how to use Kyoka Suigetsu, Then I'll also teach you how to use Kafun. Aim lifted Tsunayashiro Tokunada into the air with one hand. Watch carefully, I'll only teach you once. As these words fell, Tsunayashiro Tokunada felt his chest sink. When he looked down, he saw a palm pressing against his chest. Yasukani no Magatama. A burning golden light bloomed from Ain's palm, turned into a cross shape, and embedded itself in Tsunayashiro Tokunada's body, followed by countless small, yet boundless light bullets shooting out. Bang 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 bang. In an instant, Tsunayashiro Tokunada's body from the neck down was riddled with holes, filled with countless fine golden holes. So fast. The frequency was so high. It took nearly 2 seconds before Tsunayashiro Tokunada reacted and felt an agonizing pain flood every part of his body below the neck. Strangely, so many light bullets only shot into his body. They did not completely penetrate and fly out from the back, but instead were like countless lanterns, hanging one by one inside him. Ah! Just as the shrill scream was about to escape from Tsunayashiro Tokunada's mouth, Ain withdrew the palm in front of him. This seemingly ordinary motion of retracting his palm was like pressing an explosion button. The thousands of light bullets that had shot into Tsunayashiro Tokunada's body, shattering his internal organs, blood vessels, muscles, and bones, all exploded at the same time, blooming brilliantly from within his body until it completely flooded him. The next second, as the golden light dissipated, each light bullet vanished into the air. The torso and forelimbs of Tsunayashiro Tokunada from the neck down had disappeared from the Great Spirit Book Gallery, leaving only a withered face and a head, along with a zanpakuto that had been passed down through generations in the Tsunayashiro family, falling from midair. With a snap, it landed on the ground, and the remaining blood spurted out from his neck, quickly dyeing half of his face and the zanpakuto beside him red. Why? Why didn't you fall under Kyoka Suigetsu's complete hypnosis? Tsunayashiro Tokunada, whose body had been shattered to pieces with only a head left, did not die instantly. Supported by a life force like a candle in the wind, he barely squeezed out this sentence. Chapter 133, Sorry, before you die, I have to let you know that you were just living in an illusion. Tsunayashiro Tokunada, who collapsed on the ground with only his head left, turned his eyes with difficulty to look at Ain. He didn't understand. It was clear that he was the final winner with the last laugh, so why was the situation reversed in an instant? He didn't understand. Why was Ain immune to the influence of Kyoka Suigetsu? He understood even less. Holding the Inrakuten, he should have been the strongest, so why was he not even a match for Ain? Facing Tsunayashiro Tokunada's dying cry, Ain just glanced at him condescendingly and then withdrew his gaze. He didn't even give it a second glance. The young clan leader. How should I answer you? Should I tell you that my brother is not affected by Kyoka Suigetsu's hypnosis at all, or should I tell you that you have been living in Kyoka Suigetsu's complete hypnosis from beginning to end? Tsunayashiro Tokunada's breathing weakened little by little, and his vision was swallowed up by darkness little by little. Just when his spiritual pressure was about to dissipate like a candle in the wind, an extremely familiar voice suddenly rang in his ears. Aizen. Tsunayashiro Tokunada tried his best to lift his heavy eyelids, trying to see clearly the figure that seemed to him to have been wiped out, but in the end he still couldn't do it. He could only barely see his lower body and the zanpakuto clearly before the boundless darkness swallowed his consciousness completely. He recognized it. Kyoka Suigetsu. Sorry, before you die, I have to let you know that you were just living in an illusion. Aizen looked down at Tsunayashiro Tokunada's head and said sorry, but his tone carried a mocking tone. Zanpakuto is good, but the Shinigami is not. He bent down to pick up the Inrakuten that had fallen on the ground, looked at the zanpakuto that had been passed down from generation to generation in the Tsunayashiro family, and then handed it to Ain. Such a humble spiritual pressure actually dares to control those zanpakuto who have the reputation of being the strongest. Unbelievably stupid. No matter how similar the simulation is, it's just a counterfeit. Ain took the Inrakuten, and spiritual pressure's consciousness spread out to carefully perceive the zanpakuto in his hand, which had been passed down from generation to generation in the Tsunayashiro family. This knife is a bit interesting. Generally speaking, as long as a Shinigami falls, its zanpakuto will also die with it. What is left behind is a sealed state. Even if it is taken by other Shinigami, it is just equivalent to getting a sealed state. Just like the sealed state received when entering the Shino Academy, it is no different. Even if the soul essence of another Shinigami is rewritten, the abilities of Shikai and Bankai are no longer the same as before. Inrakuten is very special. The Shinigami is dead, but he is alive, and he seems to be open to anyone. As long as he knows the release command and name, he can use its power. Holding the Inrakuten in one hand, he walked to the central control computer in the Great Spirit Book Gallery, and then called up the information about the Inrakuten. You mean the power of this sword does not come from the soul essence of a Shinigami, but the power of the sword itself? After hearing this, Aizen was immediately interested. Hogyoku. Suddenly, the two of them said in unison. Yes. The Inrakuton is like the Hogyoku. Anyone who obtains it can use its abilities. At this time, a book also flew from the huge bookshelf. It seems that because the information records about the Inrakuton were too old, it took a while before the Great Spirit Book Gallery extracted it from the long history of Soul Society. The Zunpakuto Inrakuton, forged by the ancestor of the Tsunayashiro family, was taken from the Soul King's Hikishui, Soul Sleep, and forged with the essence of his own soul. The wielder has the ability to imitate all Zunpakuto abilities known to him. He can imitate multiple Zunpakuto at one time and use multiple Zunpakuto abilities at the same time. However, the performance of the imitated Zunpakuto is directly proportional to the spiritual pressure of the wielder. If you imitate a lower-level Shinigami's Zunpakuto, you will have stronger performance than the original holder. If you imitate a higher-level Shinigami's Zunpakuto, you will not be able to exert abilities comparable to the real thing. The price of using the Inrakuton is to cut off the soul of the sword wielder moment by moment, never to be restored again. After the book was opened, a picture similar to a holographic image emerged, introducing in detail the ability of the Inrakuton. As expected. After Aizen learned that the Inrakuton originated from the Soul King's Hikishui, Soul Sleep, there was no surprise on his face. He had come into contact with many fragments of the Soul King, and naturally knew that Soul Society could only create a Zunpakuto as powerful as the Inrakuton if it came from the power of the Soul King. No wonder. Ikaibai Osub is still alive today, but the life or death of the founders of the 5 noble families is uncertain. It's hard to say about the other 4, but the ancestor of the Tsunayashiro family most likely died at the cost of forging the Inrakuton with Soul King Hikishui, Soul Sleep. Aizen's eyes flashed with a hint of understanding. Using the power of the Soul King is not without cost. The more powerful the power of the Soul King, the greater the cost of using it. Huak, known as the son of the Soul King, needs to continuously absorb the souls of others, otherwise he will regress into the weak form he was born in. Brother, what are you going to do with this knife? Aizen asked suddenly. Although there is a price to use it, there is no denying that this is an extremely powerful Zunpakuto. If used well, it can completely reverse the overall situation. This is the Soul King's Hikishui, Soul Sleep. Hogyoku material delivered to my door unsolicited. What do you think we should do with it? Aizen threw the Inrakuton to Aizen with a backhand, not showing any nostalgia for the Inrakuton that could stimulate all Zunpakuto abilities. Aren't you going to keep it for use? Aizen reached out and took the Inrakuton. It's enough for me to have Kafuin. Not to mention, I don't think that the Zunpakuto forged from my soul essence will lose to the mere Soul King's Hikishui, Soul Sleep. Aizen smiled softly, his voice showing absolute confidence. Your Kafuin is very happy with your words. As expected, she has been forgetting food and sleep, practicing hard, and successfully evolved Shikai and Benkai. In view of your trust, she decided to open her heart to you and fully entrust the evolved power of the Zunpakuto to you. Hearing the voice coming from his ears, Aizen felt happy. Zunpakuto will evolve, he naturally knows this. For example, Yamamoto Genryu's Ishigakuni's Zunpakuto. Thousands of years ago, it was a sword of great fire that sealed all flames into the blade, burning everything it struck with pyrotechnic explosions. Thousands of years later, just like the coming of the sun, it was enough to evaporate the water in Soul Society bit by bit. The same goes for Byakuya Kuichiki's Zunpakuto. Before heading to Squad Zero, his Senbun Sakura Shikai was a sword that dispersed into thousands of blades. After returning from Squad Zero, his Senbun Sakura Shikai, the number of blades formed by dispersing the blade, was comparable to the Benkai of the past. It is clear that before and after the Zunpakuto evolved, there were differences between Shikai and Benkai. This also made Aizen full of expectations for the evolved Kafuin, and he couldn't wait to find someone to test the sword immediately. Chapter 134, The Soul King exists only to be dominated. If I had known better, I would have let him live a few more seconds. Knowing that his Zunpakuto was so advanced and had been cultivated to the point of evolution, Aizen couldn't help but glance at Tsunayashiro Tokunada at his feet. Tokunada's body and torso had been blasted into shreds, leaving only his head intact. Seeing this, Aizen felt much better, though part of him still thought it had been a bit of a mistake. Too sloppy. There was nothing wrong with beating Tsunayashiro Tokunada until only his head and a handful of Zunpakuto fragments remained. But before that, he could have tested the evolved Kafuin. Yes, the Soul King exists only to be dominated. When Aizen heard his brother's words, full of disdain for the Soul King, he didn't find them strange at all. Instead, he nodded in agreement. Take this Inrakuton and melt it to make the Hogyoku. If there's anything left, leave some for me. I'll feed it to Matsumoto Ranjaku. Before Kafuin had evolved, Aizen hadn't paid much attention to Inrakuton. Now that Kafuin had evolved, he didn't care about this Zunpakuto at all. even if it was the ancestor of Tsunayashiro's lineage. It didn't matter to him whether Aizen fused in Rakuten to create a Hogyoku or did anything else with it. Aizen nodded, but in his heart, he decided that after returning, he would split in Rakuten into 2 parts and restore 1/2 to the Soul King's Hikishui, Soul Sleep. He would then use only half of the Soul King's power to create the Hogyoku and leave the other half for Aizen to feed Matsumoto Renjaku. If it had been before, he never would have considered doing this. In the past, Aizen had believed that placing even a fingertip of the Soul King into Matsumoto Renjaku's body was both a tremendous gift and a terrible waste, let alone returning half of the Soul King's Hikishui, Soul Sleep. But now, it is different. In his eyes, Matsumoto Renjaku was simply Aizen's Hogyoku. Unlike Aizen, however, Aizen was too lazy to feed it regularly, so he allowed Matsumoto Renjaku, the Hogyoku, to continue existing in the form of a Shinigami. Feeding her with half of the Soul King's Hikishui, Soul Sleep, was the same as feeding the Hogyoku in his own hand. There was no such thing as waste. Aizen, it's time to go. Aizen withdrew his gaze from Tsunayashiro Tokunoda. It was just a sword test. There would be plenty of opportunities in the future, there was no need to rush. Before that, we need Koga to help us one more time. Aizen reached out and touched Tsunayashiro Tokunoda's lifeless head. In an instant, a large amount of white spiritual substance seeped out from Tokunoda's 7 orifices, gradually forming into a minnow's grand mask. Let's go. After completing all of this and erasing every trace left at the scene, the 2 of them began walking toward the exit. Just as they arrived at the door of the Great Spirit Book Gallery and were about to leave, 2 Zanpakuto suddenly protruded from the air to their left and right. The cold blades appeared out of thin air like ghosts and pressed against their necks. Cinerazen Sosuke. Cinerazen Sosuke. I don't think either of you will be going anywhere. As the cold voice echoed through the gallery, another hand stretched out from the air, just like the Zanpakuto before. With one swift motion, it tore off the dark gray cloth covering the body and threw it to the ground. Hikai Funkiryo. Aizen glanced behind him from the corner of his eye and saw a purple-haired Shinigami wearing a captain's haori, whose beauty rivaled that of Matsumoto Renjaku. Astonishingly, it was the captain of the Imperial Guard 12th Division, Hikai Funkiryo. Your destination is either Hell or Mugen, whichever eternity you prefer. On the other hand, behind Aizen, whose neck was also pinned by a Zanpakuto, a skeletal arm stretched out from the air and peeled off another piece of dark gray cloth. What followed was a Shinigami with 6 skeletal arms, ornate golden hairpieces on her head, and a delicate, slightly pale face. Shutara Senjimaaru. When Aizen saw her face clearly, a flash of solemnity and surprise crossed his eyes behind the framed glasses. It seemed he hadn't expected to encounter the duo from Division 12 in the Great Spirit Book Gallery. She was also the only female member of the future Royal Guard, 0 Division. Surprised? But I advise you not to move that hand. Unless you don't want it anymore. Shutara Senjimaaru glanced at Aizen, who, despite the blade at his neck, actually tried to reach for Kyoka Suigetsu. TSK. As soon as she finished speaking, a white robe was already draped over Aizen's body. At the same time, the 6 skeletal arms behind her each held needles and threads, and in the next instant, they turned into afterimages, wrapping around Aizen. In an instant, Aizen's entire body was pierced by spiritual pressure needles and threads. That's better. For someone as dangerous as you, it's best if you can't even move a finger. Don't you agree, Aizen Sosuke? Shutara Senjimaaru pierced all of Aizen's limbs, including his fingers and toes, then lowered her Zanpakuto. You probably wouldn't want me to use similar methods on you. Shinigami hero. Aizen Sosuke. On the other hand, Hikai Funkiryo stared coldly at Aizen, her eyes burning with searing anger. That was the fury of someone who had been deceived and manipulated. It seems you already know. Aizen glanced at Aizen, who was immobilized by the threads and needles, his hand that had been reaching for his Zanpakuto also frozen in place. Kidnapping the captain of the 5th Division, orchestrating Koga's fall and a Zanpakuto rebellion, murdering Kuachiki Jinrai in the Confession Palace, using the Kuachiki clan for hollow experiments, killing Kuachiki Jinrai, Hirako Shinji, Koga, and dragging them all into your schemes. Aizen Sosuke. If you mean these crimes, then yes, we know them very clearly. Hikai Funkiryo shouted each word sharply and precisely. With each crime she listed, her voice grew colder. By the end, her killing intent echoed throughout the Great Spirit Book Gallery. Also, the murder of the Tsunayashiro family heir. Shutara Senjimaaru's voice was equally frigid. Though, unlike Hikai Funkiryo, she didn't want to flay the Aizen brothers alive purely out of personal betrayal, or she had deep bonds with Hirako Shinji and the others. In my memory, I don't recall leaving any flaws. Theoretically, you two shouldn't have had the ability to see through everything. No, not shouldn't, absolutely couldn't. Aizen frowned slightly, trying to understand how Hikai Funkiryo and Shutara Senjumaru had managed to break free from Kyoka Suigetsu's illusion and expose them, or if it was because of the pain from the spiritual pressure threads piercing his body. It's better if you don't speak. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't be able to resist killing you before you even stand trial. As soon as Shutara Senjumaru heard Aizen try to speak, her already foul mood turned even worse. PFF. One of her skeletal arms opened its fingers, flicked the spiritual pressure thread, and directly pierced Aizen's throat. It didn't kill him, but it did make him lose the ability to speak. Chapter 135, Captain Kiryu, I just want to make progress. After sewing Aizen like clothes and piercing his throat to take away his voice, Shutara Senjumaru felt that the frustration and anger that had been occupying her heart had finally dissipated a lot. Can you speak properly? After doing all this, she glanced coldly at Aizen, who was being restrained by Hikai Funkiryo. Seeing this, Aizen seemed to be shocked and remained silent without speaking. After Hikai Funkiryo witnessed Shutara Senjumaru's behavior, she seemed to be playing tricks like a stranger in her life. Holding Zanpakuto with one hand and holding his neck, she stretched the other hand from the back of the waist to the front, pressed his waist and abdomen with 5 fingers, and pressed on him, as if she wanted to press his whole body into her arms. As bursts of orange light bloomed from the palm of her hand, Aizen's expression suddenly changed. His body kept trembling, sometimes expanding, sometimes contracting, and then thick tree roots grew out of his shoulders and legs, like a python wrapping around the whole body. Don't be delusional, use any spiritual pressure. It doesn't make any sense. Before taking action, I have made a series of arrangements based on your abilities, such as the seeds I just implanted in your body. I think you should have experienced it, the feeling of spiritual pressure being absorbed like nutrients throughout your body. Hikai Funkiryo released her left arm from Aizen. Your flash Kafuin can control photons to fight, as fast as the speed of light. Your dark Kafuin can seal everything Zanpakuto, whether it is Shikai or Bankai. The best way to deal with you is to attack your spiritual pressure directly. Without spiritual pressure, your Zanpakuto, your Kido, your Kendo, your hand-to-hand combats, and your flash steps are all in vain. She walked around from behind Aizen to the front, but in the process, her other hand still held Zanpakuto and still did not leave Aizen's neck. It seemed that even after restraining Aizen's spiritual pressure, it still felt not safe enough and could not be taken lightly. More than that, the air in the Great Spirit Book Gallery must have been filled with spices by you two. Aizen didn't seem worried about his situation. It could even be said that he didn't care. After a brief change of expression, he regained his composure. This calm and unhurried demeanor made Hikai Funkiryo secretly praise him even if she hated what he did. Rakongai Origin. A man who has already mastered 13 Division of Imperial Guards within a year of joining Siriite AI? Not without reason. With just this magnanimity, it would be difficult for other captains Imperial Guard to spend their entire lives chasing after him. It's just a matter of treating others in their own way. Didn't you just mix Hollow's power into the air, and then corrode the soul through the wounds on the body, so that the Kuachiki family could hollow fee? I'm just following you. The burning spirit powder mixed in the air has been modified by us. Once it is inhaled into the body, even the captain of the Imperial Guard will have spiritual pressure chaos. Once it is forcibly mobilized, it will immediately burn and explode. Shutara Senjumaru saw that one of the Aizen brothers was made into clothes by herself and could not move, and the other was planted with spiritual pressure seeds and could not even use spiritual pressure. She seemed relieved and her tone became casual. It was a gesture of having the overall situation in mind. Poof! The 6 skeleton arms simultaneously fired out spiritual pressure threads, like purple lasers that cut through the void, completely penetrating the Seiketsu and Hikishui, soul sleep, of Aizen and Aizen. Aizen's expression remained calm, but his face gradually became as pale as paper. Amazing. You were able to endure the pain of being pierced by the Seiketsu and Hikishui, soul sleep, and the consequences of losing Shinigami's power in an instant. Aizen Sosuke, with your talent, you can take the right path. Why do you choose an unforgivable crooked path? When Hikai Funkiryo saw this scene, even though she hated and was angry at what Aizen had done, she couldn't help but feel a bit of appreciation and pity. Captain Kiryu, I just want to make progress. Aizen was chatting and laughing. It seemed as if the Hikai Funkiryo in front of him was not an enemy who wanted to take his life, but a friend. Can you trample on Siriite's rules and play with 13 Division of Imperial Guards as Shinigami if you want to progress? Hikai Funkiryo saw Aizen's unwavering eyes and knew that she and the other party were not from the same place. Their concepts and cognitions were completely different, so naturally it was impossible for them to understand each other. Is this also Aizen's reason? Shutara Senjumaru looked at Aizen, who was made into clothes by herself. Roughly the same. Aizen was noncommittal. I see. No matter what the reason is, I can only tell you that your life of sin ends here. Whether you or your brother, you will spend the rest of your life repenting in hell or Mukin." Shutara Senjimaru breathed out gently, seeming to be relieved. It could be seen. Even though she carefully prepared numerous means and even carried out a sneak attack, she was still under tremendous psychological pressure before the dust settled. Until this moment. Only after completely destroying Ain's Seiketsu and Hikijui, soul sleep, could she feel completely at ease. It's time to call it a day. Hearing this, Ain did not refute, but followed Shutara Senjimaru's words, smiled and nodded. Hikai Funkaryo and Shutara Senjimaru suddenly felt frightened when they heard this. Ain's words and reaction were not at all what a desperate person should behave like. Especially when the other party looked at them, his eyes seemed to be looking at clowns on the stage. Poof! Before the two of them could figure out the reason, bursts of golden light suddenly appeared from Ain's riddled body, and then his body gradually transformed into elements, turning into countless photons from head to toe, and was restrained by the roots of the spiritual pressure tree, dissipating slowly until it disappeared completely. Clone? Faced with the sudden change, Hikai Funkaryo's face changed drastically, and she was horrified. She didn't know that the Ain in front of her, who was under her control and whose Seiketsu and Hikijui, soul sleep, were destroyed, was just a clone. Seeing this, she immediately used flash steps to move away, but just as she was less than 10 meters away, a terrifying gravitational force was already coming from above her head. When she looked up, she found that Ain was standing directly above her head, opening his palm facing her. Dark water. As a steady stream of thick black mist spewed out from the palm of his hand and turned into a whirlpool shape, the terrifying gravity surged out like an invisible torrent. Hikai Funkaryo immediately left her feet off the ground, and her body moved forward uncontrollably, flying toward the ceiling of the spirit book gallery. Damn it! Hikai Funkaryo wanted to struggle, but her body felt like it was carrying a mountain. The dense gravity suppressed her and made it difficult to move. She saw her body getting closer and closer to Ain under the attraction and pull of the darkness. Knowing that once caught, Zanpakuto's abilities would be completely sealed, she immediately wanted to free her Zanpakuto. Laser Light. Chapter 136, Everything you know about my abilities is just what I want you to know. Ain had a clear view of Hikai Funkaryo's movements. Before the opponent could free Zanpakuto, the other person had disappeared from midair. He flashed in front of Hikai Funkaryo at the speed of light. He stretched out two fingers and aimed at the parts that symbolized Shinigami's power. Seiketsu and Hikijui. Whoosh! Accompanied by the sharp sound of breaking through the air, two golden laser beams were shot out from the index finger and middle finger at the same time, and they were engulfed in Hikai Funkaryo's body. While penetrating her body, her Seiketsu and Hikijui were also pierced together. Snap! The injury caused by the laser beam passing through the body, the pain caused by the piercing of the Seiketsu and Hikijui. Hikai Funkaryo could only helplessly loosen her grip on Zanpakuto, and then like a soft-skinned snake that had its bones taken away, her body trembled and twitched slightly in midair while falling to the ground. In a flash, the situation of the two people had completed the transformation from offensive to defensive. In the last second, Ain was not only pierced through the Hikijui and Seiketsu, but his body also suffered various injuries. His spiritual pressure was restrained and his body was imprisoned. The next second, it was Hikai Funkaryo whose body was pierced by the laser beam, piercing through the Seiketsu and Hikijui, and fell at the feet of Ain. The situation took a turn for the worse. Seeing the tragic situation of Hikai Funkaryo, Shutara Senjimaru had no time to pay attention. Just because at the same time Ain took action, 6-path spiritual pressure light sheets appeared out of thin air around her, sealing and imprisoning her hands, together with the 6 skeletal arms. Bakudo number 61, 6 rods prison of light.